Call to order the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting for Monday, May 8th. First, like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territories of the Nanaimo First Nation, and our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018 number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members have been granted the authority to join the meetings electronically. Presently we have nobody meeting electronically, maybe later. So the first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. And Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. For late items for the agenda today, we have agenda item 6A2, Emergency Management Update, adding the PowerPoint presentation titled 2023 Emergency Program Overview. And actually, Chair, we're going to change the order of 6A2 and 6A1 to have the Emergency Management Update first on the agenda, followed by the Prosperous Nanaimo and city structure of the integrated action plans for the city plan. As well, after that, we will be adding other motions for consideration that were brought forward by yourself, Chair, and Councillor Brown, and that will be done after going over the other integrated action plans for the city plan. And under the emergency management presentation, it says to be introduced by Chief Doyle, which still will be the case, but Mr. Rudolph would like to say something first. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Can we get a motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended? Councillor Perino, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. All in favor? Motion carried. And this brings us for motion of the adoption of minutes as circulated. Moved by Councillor Eastmere, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. All in favor? Motion carried. Which brings us to item 5, agenda planning, upcoming topics and initiatives, to be introduced by Ms. Gurry.
Thanks again, Chair. So noted in your agenda and up on the screen today is upcoming topics and initiatives set out for upcoming GBC meetings. So far to date, we have today's GBC topic noted. Then for May 29th, it notes that the city plan neighborhood association's top priority actions. So that'll be the GBC to go over the neighborhood association meeting that you had on April the 26th and go over those priority actions that were noted and taken note of from that meeting that you had. As well, and not noted for May 29th, will be some housing initiatives, including infill and intensification in existing neighborhoods, expanding secondary suites, adaptable housing, and family-friendly housing. So that will be coming forward on the May 29th meeting as well, because of some switches with the city plan. Then on June 12th, you have the Ethics Commissioner Bylaw Workshop. You have City of Nanaimo Communications Plan coming to you, and Public Safety Committee Terms of Reference. Then you can see noted for June 26th, tentatively right now we have the revised Integrated Action Plan and Priority List for your endorsement to then go to Council, the tentatively noted Draft Monitoring Strategy Introduction, and City Plan Monitoring Committee's tentative for that meeting as well. So that is what is on the upcoming topics and initiatives list.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Any questions from council? Seeing none, we will move on to item 6, which is reports. And we've switched around the two, so that brings us to emergency management mandate, or emergency management update, introduced by Chief Doyle.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council. Thanks for having us here today to give you a brief overview of...
Sorry, Chair,
Oh, sorry.
just briefly, Mr. Rudolph.
Just to introduce the introduction.
Sorry, introduce from Mr. Rudolph. Introduce Mr. Doyle.
This is an important topic for me, and it's an important topic for council because emergency preparedness is an important period. As you can see what's going on in Alberta and parts of British Columbia. It's really important that our council has the tools to understand how the system is currently working and that the administration is up to speed on what it needs to be doing in preparation for any future potential incidents. This happens to be Emergency Preparedness Week, and Mr. Evan Lloyd is here today to introduce himself formally. He's been here before, and kind of give us a bit of a 101 update for our own municipal emergency preparedness. Now, the emergency preparedness function has been moved around the organization over the past few years. The retirement of Karen Lindsay last year had us do a recruitment, and we're very pleased to get Mr. Lloyd to come, and I'm sure you'll explain who you are and your background, and it's important so you understand that and what he's doing. And it was the decision at that time to house the function in the fire department. It had been previously in corporate services, but it had been in the fire department as well. So it's not really, it's a corporate resource. It's really important to remember that. It's not a fire department resource. The responsibility crosses all aspects of our organization, from business continuity to all the risks and plans that we need to do. So I just wanted to reiterate that we're very pleased to have Evan here. He's a strong player in the field. Chief Doyle's, I know, really thrilled to have the opportunity to work with him, and he's here to introduce him. And we just thought we'd spend up to as long as it takes today, but not that long, just kind of going over emergency preparedness for the city of Nanaimo and where we're at. And if you have any questions on specific topics, I'm sure we can either answer them today or take them away and come back. So turn it over to Chief Doyle.
Well, Council and our Chair and Council, I think Mr. Rudolph's hit everything that I was going to say. So we'll turn it over to Mr. Lloyd to start his presentation. So,
Welcome to council, Mr. Lloyd.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here. Very excited and grateful to have the opportunity to speak to you today. And as the two gentlemen beside me mentioned, we'll have an overview of the emergency program in the city of Nanaimo, which I thought was an appropriate topic. Yeah. Do I? I don't have control of the slides, actually. Oh, perfect. There we go. Okay, so. Does it?
Maybe shoot it at that.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so the agenda for today, again, we can talk to these things as briefly or as in length as you guys choose, but we'll do a program overview. We'll talk about some of the Emergency Operations Center principles, structure, and roster. I'll give a bit of an insight into the Emergency Program Act update that came up as a topic a week or two ago, and I'll talk a little bit about the extreme weather update and planning that we're doing for that. Just an introduction of myself. I won't go on too long about this. This is actually probably the most terrifying part of the presentation, but I have an extensive background in emergency management. I started in the BC Wildfire Service in 2009, and ever since then I've been working or volunteering or studying in emergency management ever since. So background in wildfire, the volunteer side, health emergency management, a bit of consulting, and some municipal work as well. I also have a master's degree in disaster and emergency management from Royal Roads. So again, very happy to be here and working with you all. So just a bit of an update or maybe a reminder for staff on the mandate that the city has for planning for major emergencies and disasters. This is an overview of our mandate. There are sort of a few pillars of this mandate. The primary one is the Emergency Program Act. That's a provincial legislation that says municipalities must plan for and identify the hazards in their communities. We also have City of Nanaimo, there's the Emergency Program Act, must establish and maintain emergency management organization. So an emergency management organization, as per our bylaw 7202, says that the organization comprises of the local authority, I think represented by yourselves, the emergency planning committee, and the emergency planning or emergency program manager, which is my role. So one of the things we are doing right now is reestablishing the emergency planning committee with the senior leadership of the municipal government, or sorry, the this side of our city staff. And that body's role is to provide strategic direction and oversight to my role, and to approve and present to this body emergency plans and procedure updates that we might come across. The committee also, as I said, provides strategic direction, but it aligns basically the emergency program with all the city departments related to public safety across the city. So as Jake mentioned, I work sort of very closely with all the various different departments of the city staff. The body of the committee also provides their knowledge, and they facilitate resources to improve the overall public safety outcomes for the city of Nanaimo. Any questions about the Emergency Management Committee? Okay, so how do you guys receive notification in the event of a major incident? This is a screenshot of our organizational chart for the Emergency Operations Center, which is the organizational structure that the city staff take on when there's a major incident in Nanaimo. This is an example of what it might look like. And as you can see at the top of the chart, it shows that the EOC director, the Emergency Operations Center director, reports to mayor and council. So if we have a major incident in the city, we will form the structure, and that the person sort of who is responsible for overseeing the Emergency Operations Center will report to you. So here are some of the roles of the senior leaders in that organizational chart. As I mentioned, the EOC director is accountable and responsible for managing the incident. They approve incident reports that go up to mayor and council, and they're very involved in all the decisions that get made. However, as incidents may present themselves with high degree of complexity or high amount of resources required, we can expand that organizational chart or shrink it as we need it. So an emergency operations center could comprise of the three of us here. It can comprise of many staff across the city, but you have that sort of span of control. I'll talk a little bit more about the attributes of the EOC in a little bit, but essentially EOC director reports to you guys. The operations section chief is responsible for tactical response and linking the EOC with what's happening on the ground, making sure the resources there have what they need, that the objectives that are set by the EOC are matched with what we need to do on the ground. The planning section is responsible for information display and documentation collection and retention within the Emergency Operations Center, which is highly important because whenever we have an incident, the review process of how that incident went is highly important for not just oversight, but also for improving our procedures going forward. The planning section is also really key to ensuring the functions and the cycle within the Emergency Operations Center runs smoothly. The logistics section is, as you might imagine, responsible for procuring equipment, supplies, resources, personnel, as the situation or response dictates. That's really focused inwards on what both the Emergency Operations Center needs or what resources that are sort of run by the operations section might need as well. And then we also have a finance section that tracks contracts, invoices, costs, and submits expenditures to the province directly if we have a task number, which we would almost certainly get when we declare an emergency. Any questions? Yes?
I've got a question from Councillor Armstrong, then Mayor Crowe.
Thank you. Just my question, when it's in planning, I was actually stuck there, no offense to the planners, instead of being orange, for the big windstorms we had on the North Shore many years ago. And we found out very fast that we did not know what seniors facilities required oxygen, et cetera. Do we have that here? And how are they prioritized as to who gets the generators for those?
Seniors facilities? So,
Yeah, that's what we look more at.
through the chair to the councillor.
Yeah.
So I mentioned my background in health emergency management as well. Part of my main role in an incident response is as the liaison officer. If I go back and show the chart, I'm on there. And a lot of my day-to-day function is making relationships with my counterparts and other entities and organizations. And I've met with my counterpart at Health Emergency Management BC. That's really, I would say, information that they would hold and responsibility they would have to manage those facilities. However, through our coordination and our collaborative work, we would either look to support them if they made a request to us for resources, or if it was a joint response type situation, then we would work together using a logistics section and the information that we have available to us to procure resources and be organized in how we deliver those to a facility. Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, that's good, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Armstrong. Mayor Crowe.
Thank you very much. And just on the practical side of it, all right, so we have, I don't know, a tank explosion, and we've got a major fire disaster. Quote unquote, who's in who's at the top of the chain of command, in a sense? You know, I see EOC director accountable, responsible for managing the incident, to approve incident reports to mayor and council, but who literally is gonna say, right, you do this, this, and this? If I walked into the room, who's gonna be the big cheese?
Yeah, so formerly we had an organizational chart that had persons' names already attached to the specific roles, but sort of the modern approach to incident management is to be flexible in that sense. And basically, the type of incident and what's happening dictates who is responsible and we can be flexible and specific about who takes on certain roles. So I would say in the example that you use is probably the gentleman to my left might possibly take on an EOC director role in that situation, although the gentleman to my right might also be involved as well. So it would depend, and I defer to them.
The reason I ask is, and I don't mean this unkindly, if there's an emergency, you gotta have, and so is there a scheme or plan in place already that says, no question, this is the protocol? If it's an earthquake and buildings are collapsing, but we don't have many fire incidents, again, who's gonna be in charge? If it's a riot, for instance, you know, some of our more extreme vigilantes get together. Is it Superintendent Fletcher? In other words, I mean, I think I know where it's probably going to go, but I just want to know that that's part of the system.
Through your chair to Mayor Krog, I can take a shot at that. In terms of who's going to run the incident, so there's a sequential roster that you pull off of. So depending on the incident, if it was let's just say it was a police incident, like a first-person shooter or something like that, you may, Superintendent Fletcher may be pulled for an ops director, or could be the overall director as well. So it is modular, and it is, if it's a fire incident, a wildfire incident, then perhaps I would be pulled in as the ops section chief. And so each of these branches has an ops section chief or a planning section chief, and then there's the overall director. So depending on the type of incident that you're facing, you put people in those positions that can manage the overall incident. So, and that's why you have a roster built out to put into those positions. In terms of on the ground, because I think it's important to acknowledge this, is that on the ground there's also an incident commander. So that's the field information that they're directing the specific operational activities on the ground. Depending on the size of the incident, that can also, it also flows through the ops section chief and through the overall EOC model. But the reality is that a lot of the people sitting in the EOC aren't on the ground at the incident. So a lot of your the EOC role is to support the incident and see some of the bigger picture. If it was a wildfire in Lindley Valley, the incident commander would be dealing with the incident-specific actions in the incident, and then the rest of the roles in the EOC might be doing with evacuation, operational periods, logistics, staffing, communications, and so on and so forth. So it's hard to have, the model is very defined, but who's in the roles is more of a roster that you'd pull off depending on who's trained and what type of incident it is. So.
And if I may, Chair, and I'm going to assume that for instance, if it's the RCMP, if the superintendent's in Hawaii, then it's going to be the deputy and so on. In other words, it's going to follow a known chain of command. All I'm getting at is, you know, if there's an emergency and everyone's panicking, the thing that always drives me crazy, everybody starts screaming and yelling and nobody knows what the hell to do. I want to know.
Yeah, Your Worship, if I could add just at another dimension. So as an example, we've had a couple of activations since I've been here. One I recall was a few Christmases ago, we had a windstorm, and I got a call from the fire chief at the day that said, look, there's too many streets closed with wires down, and so it's beyond our capacity to respond and take all these calls. So the call was made at that time to activate the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. So then the call went out to people that were on the chart to come to in the old fire hall. And so the person that in that case was there, and I was the director and then there was the operational team that was set up. You know, the people that are in the operations center are not out in the field. There's a whole different command structure out in the field to deal with an issue. But this is the behind scenes And this is a relatively short thing, but then it actually turned into a longer-term thing because we couldn't get our water system to stay on. As you may have recalled, we had a recurring failure in our dam or in our water system that couldn't be, so it became a different kind of emergency. So that became, instead of it went from sort of the fire department in the field doing it to the engineering department looking after the water, the integrity of the water. And we had a period of time when the hospital, for example, was without water. But we still had the one, so there was a lot of communication going on. And you could actually have, if it goes on for a while, you could have an EOC that's not actually physically there, it's just virtual, and we've had those as well. So there is somebody who's designated to be in charge, and their job is to be in the room, looking at the big picture and seeing how all these pieces fit together. And you do action reports. You'll say, oh, this is it for the next 2 hours, and you come back and that type of thing. So. And then it depends on the incident, as Chief Doyle has said. It could be a fire led out in the field, or if it's engineering, or if it's police, or those types of things. But if it's a longer term event, it becomes a much different thing, like an earthquake, or the floods in Abbotsford, or the fires in some of these other communities. It becomes a different thing. So, the trick is, are you going to call the province and say, we'd like to get a number and activate the EOC? That is the start of this EOC process. All the other emergencies are just emergencies, and they're important, but if you trigger the EOC, that you get a number, and that means people are on call, and that becomes the priority, staying organized. And there is one person in that room that wears the hat, and it could be any one of the senior staff who happen to be there, and if it's a long event, it would have to rotate anyway. And then there would be somebody out in the field looking after coordinating the field activities as well.
Great, thank you. I got Councillor Armstrong and then Hemmons.
I just have a question on that. Are you still using the ICS model, or has it changed?
Yes, that's exactly what this is.
Because I was going to say, you may not get Superintendent Fletcher or whatever if they're not trained to level 4. It has to be somebody trained to level 4. So you could get like somebody like Derek Balderston, who's got that training indirectly, because from when I was there, if somebody was there not trained to level 4 and something happened.
Yeah, I don't know that that it is written in stone somewhere that you must be a level 4 ICS training.
I shouldn't say that. It was an RCMP policy that you must have that training.
Yeah, so for our, like as the city department, we can make those decisions ourselves, I believe, and as Jake mentioned, that we could have different people wear that hat. I don't know that having that specific certification is a requirement internally, at least anyway. But we would obviously rely on someone senior
and then
experienced to
my second question is, and we did this on the North Shore, was Squamish Nation and Tsleil-Waututh had somebody trained to level 4 so that they could come in and make the decisions. Have we looked at doing that here with the Snamo First Nation?
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit later on about some of our engagement
that's good then.
with the Snamo First Nation.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. Similar line of questioning as the mayor's. This is very municipally focused, obviously, but I'm curious, emergencies don't just happen in the municipality. I imagine the hospital is involved, the airport is involved, BC Ferries is involved. So are there similar organizations or structures in those organizations, and where and when do we connect with them, and then who's in charge?
Yeah, excellent question. So yes, a lot of those entities, depending on what kind of entity they are, they have different responsibilities or regulations around what they do. But yes, in short, they all do have someone that I engage with on a regular basis to coordinate and answer those questions or think about these considerations and things like that. They're on their own schedules for whenever they do plan updates and testing and things like that, but it is a main function of my role to coordinate with them on a regular basis, and I've done so already in the few months that I've been here. So an entity like BC Ferries, for instance, would probably come under Transport Canada for the regulations saying they must have these plans in place and they must test them regularly, et cetera. And through my coordination with them, we get invitations to attend their events, attend regular meetings. There's a group for the organized by the Port Authority that has, I can't remember the acronym right now, excuse me, the MERC, Marine Emergency Response Committee. So that's different, both private and public sector agencies that sit on a committee. We meet once a month or once every 2 months, and just the other day there was a tabletop exercise through them, and so we get that sort of relationship building, coordination, and therefore if we have an incident, we have contacts there that we can engage with Just, I've got, we've got the phone numbers and contact information for important people that make these similar decisions at those entities as well. Yeah, so I've met with my counterpart at the Sanema First Nation, Tina Wesley, who, as again, I'll mention a little bit later on. She's new to her role as well, and she has a couple different hats that she wears, but she is the emergency coordinator essentially for them. And I've met with the airport as well, crossed paths with BC Ferries at the recent MERC meeting and have reached out to them. So I don't believe I talked about it in this presentation, but I mentioned to the senior leadership staff last week that I'm planning on forming a couple different committees. One is a core regional emergency response committee with ourselves, the SFN, and the regional district. So I have counterparts, Erica Bouchant at the regional district is my counterpart there. And so Erica, myself, and Tina would form a small group so that we can be coordinated as local authorities for our communities, and that we are on the same page and can, consider options for mutual assistance in the event of major emergencies. And then a larger regional committee I'd like to form as well through that includes basically all the entities you mentioned, both the public sector and private sector entities that basically exist in our region. I'm very curious about hazardous material incidents in Nanaimo, and there's just a lot of cross-jurisdictional things to consider. And when I met with my counterpart at the airport, they were very enthusiastic about that proposal, as have everyone else I've met with. They've been very enthusiastic about us doing so that it gives a seat at the table for everyone to consider these situations. And if we get into a place where we're doing more complex exercises and trial runs of our Emergency Operations Center, it gives us an opportunity to loop in those entities and for them to test out their plans in coordination with us. So it just strengthens everyone, and that's, again, a main function of my role. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And just really quickly, is there like a provincial counterpart that covers this region that is assigned?
Yes, so we have a regional manager for Emergency Management and Climate Readiness BC, which was formerly Emergency Management BC. So it's a new ministry the provincial government has started this year, you may have heard. And John Forrest is my counterpart there. He's the regional manager. And when John is unavailable, there's someone else wears that hat. So there's several regional emergency managers for EMCR up and down the island, and they just share. If he's off duty, then someone's always available 24/7. So when Jake mentioned we submit to the province for task numbers, those are to support our funding of our response to an incident. So when we had the cold weather a couple times this past winter, they were available basically 24/7 to approve our requests for funding, essentially to support the response.
Great.
NBC? Yeah, so Health Emergency Management BC, my counterpart there is Donna Coleman. I used to formerly work with her supervisor, who's the director of NBC for Island Health, and they have an on-call structure as well, actually, and they have a provincial response structure that sort of mirrors the EMCR provincial response structure also in Victoria. It's called the HEC, the Health Emergency Coordination Center, and so they're available 24/7 to support us as well. Someone is. So, yeah.
Great, thank you so much. I think that's all the questions for now, so.
So on the slide here is just the key concepts for the Emergency Operations Center and Incident Management. We've talked about some of these already, but what being flexible in this structure allows us to do is to coordinate with our counterparts, as I mentioned. So the structure that we use is the same structure they use. The language what we use is the same language they use when we're in an emergency response situation, not in our day-to-day. So part of my role is to coach our staff on those terms, on the structure, the processes they're in. There's a lot to it that we don't generally expect other staff across the city to know or be up to date with constantly. So it's my job to coach them through in an incident as well as liaise, but then on a regular basis do training and education for our staff so that they do keep up to date a bit on things. What else? Span of control. So I mentioned we can have a small EOC, we can have a large EOC, and management by objectives. So what the EOC really does is the section chiefs in the EOC will, on a regular basis, go around the table and see what the objectives should be for the overall incident, and then the EOC director will approve the priority of those objectives, will assign resources to meet those objectives, and then that's basically the content of the report that you'll receive on a regular basis in an incident from the EOC director, is the objectives, where we're at, what our status is, and what our needs are. Any questions on these things? These are concepts that are industry standard, across the board, everywhere you go. There was a question that came up. There was excuse me, I forgot the name of the conference 2 weekends ago, where some Emergency Management, Emergency Program Act updates were mentioned. and that came down to me, that trickled down to me. So I wanted to just talk about a little bit what that means for you guys. Or for us, I should say. So the province has been in the process of updating the Emergency Program Act legislation for emergency management, and that's really to update or to align with the Sendai framework and the Declaration of Rights on Indigenous People in BC. And so it means a couple different things. In short, it means there's greater expectation for municipal emergency programs to do more as far as both coordination with our First Nations as well, and also looking a little more expansively at our responsibilities for mitigation and recovery. So if you go to take a class online for emergency management, they talk about 4 pillars of emergency management. And the 2 that are most often done well so far are response and preparation. We've got Emergency Preparedness Week. We have our strong, emergency response capability in the city, but looking forward to our mitigation and adapting to climate change is one thing that we might have to expect in the future, and also having more detailed recovery plans for major emergencies such as earthquakes and things like that, which is something I know that counterparts of mine in the Lower Mainland have been working on a little bit for debris and things like that. Just going backwards though, talking about our coordination with First Nations, I really work closely with Lisa Bhopal Singh and defer to her on a lot of our engagement with the Nanaimo First Nation, but I did mention that Tina Wesley is my counterpart. I've met Tina a couple times, and I'm looking forward to having a closer, more regular coordination with Tina in future as well. But an example of our engagement with them is, I think the one time I did get to speak to you before was mentioning the HRVA grant application. HRVA, I was told not to use acronyms, and I'm using the acronym. Hazard, Risk, and Vulnerability Assessment. That is our proposed study that we're waiting on approval, grant funding approval from the UBCM for. I don't think I need to explain that one. It's to understand what our hazards are and to rank the risks that we have to them, so we know what our greatest risk is here, so that we can be specific about the work that my program does in handling those risks. We have one. It was done in 2014, which is almost 10 years ago, and so we're looking for an update on that. And the SFN have written a band council resolution to partner with us on that study if it is approved. Any questions?
I think you're clear. Carry on.
Great. So this week is Emergency Preparedness Week. Just a quick on what some of the things the messaging that we're giving out to the community. The themes this week, for this year are know the hazards, build a kit, make a plan, and then there's some information on National Early Earthquake Warning System that's apparently coming out soon. And I was just reviewing that this morning, and it sounds like the federal government anticipates 1 minute of warning time for earthquakes in future, which is exciting. It would come out probably through the broadcast intrusive alerting. Basically, when your phone pops up and buzzes, it says there's an emergency. It would be that system. So it wouldn't have to trickle through my desk or Tim's desk or anything like that. It would just go out straight to the community in question. But yeah, all of our messaging this week is around know the hazards, build a kit, and making a plan at home. We did a news release that came out on Sunday. We're doing preparedness tips through social media. I'm working closely with our communications team, and they've been excellent in supporting me with that. We've got a banner on the homepage that directs you to our updated personal preparedness page. So we just did a complete update to the emergency management page for the city website. That's got all new content in there and just a bit of a refresh and shine. And then we've got a section coming out in the e-news in Nanaimo this week as well. So that's what we're doing this year for Emergency Preparedness Week. Questions on that? Tim?
We're also engaged in Fire Smart. So in communities, we've got communities on Protection Island and Long Lake, and then we're also doing some open houses, not this week, but they're coming up in the following week. So we've got 2 open houses, one at the Nanaimo Ice Center and one at Oliver Woods, that our staff will be Mr. Lloyd and Deputy Chief Whiting and the rest of our team engaged in Fire Smart will be meeting with the community and helping them get prepared on the Fire Smart activities. So.
Yeah, and just building on that, obviously extreme weather is a big topic right now, both for seasonal readiness for the upcoming summer season, but also in a review from the winter. And I guess the three responses we had to cold weather this winter as the weather dipped a few times. So when we have, and I just put this chart up just to describe to the council here how the emergency program is continuously updated and reviewed and improved. So when we have an incident or if we hold a major exercise, we take that and we review it through an after action report process. where we just gather the basically senior leadership, a lot of the staff that comprise the Emergency Management Committee, and discuss how it went, what worked well, what needs to be improved. We take that, we form recommendations from that. We go to the committee and receive their approval for action on those recommendations, and then we go forward from there. So that's sort of the process we're in right now for cold weather. I've put a red circle around the area, the stage that we're at. Getting the Emergency Management Committee up and going again is going to allow us to be formal with that process and have our recommendations approved and then action taken to update our response for next time. I think, if I recall, the two main recommendations currently on draft are to better understand how what the province expectations of the city are in cold weather response, because we had some challenges there with the MHO's expectations of the city and our response. And then just formalizing, I think, some of our response procedures based on the lessons learned from this past winter. As far as upcoming seasonal readiness, we've got extreme heat considerations coming down the line. As Tim mentioned, we also have Fire Smart. So actually, my topics for the Emergency Management Committee for this seasonal readiness are extreme heat, Fire Smart, and major planned events. So major public events where we have a large number of people gathering. But as far as I just thought that talking about extreme heat and the mapping project in particular that's currently underway would be appropriate for you guys. Basically, with myself and the community, I always call them the planning staff, but I haven't updated my terminology internally. I work with Lisa Bhopal Singh, Christy Wood, Lisa Brinkman regularly. There's extreme heat. They initiated a project before I joined, but I managed to join in time for the consultant to be hired and brought on. We're doing an extreme heat mapping project right now where we are engaging with our community volunteer programs and partners that serve our community to understand the extreme heat risks that we have and come up with some updated procedures for how we would handle future heat waves based on the information that we gathered from the heat dome in 2021 and the coroner's report that gave us very detailed information about who was at most significant mortality risk from future heat waves. We've got some excellent information. I think there's been we've gathered some very excellent information from both our community groups and members of the public about how we would reach people who are at risk from heat waves. And yeah, I can go on about that, but I'll stop there. Any questions about that?
Believe not.
I believe that's my last slide. So if there's any other questions or things people wanted to talk about, that'd be great.
Great. Got Councillor Armstrong, then Councillor Perino.
I do have a question, and I don't know if it goes to you or not, but with all the fires like we see in Alberta and stuff, and they say all of them are human caused, are we doing anything to eliminate some of the fuel loads? Do you know, because that's one of the biggest issues that we hear, that these fires are burning because we haven't done any forest risk mitigation or anything.
Right. So I can talk about wildfire for a long time. So in the NIMO, we have a Fire Smart program. And that's, as far as I understand it, in conjunction with the fire department, park staff, and the community as well. And there's a couple pieces to it. There's a couple legs. A big part is community education. And Fire Smart's really a sort of meant to be a grassroots up program where we provide information to homeowners to improve or to reduce the risk on their own properties with fuel load and fitting and stuff like that. But there is a program with this on the city side through the park staff to do some mitigation work and fuel load management. The scientific information that we have for our wildfire risk locally in Nanaimo is comparatively low compared to other places that we see in the interior, places like the Okanagan and things like that. We are on the dry side of Vancouver Island, but we are still in the coastal zone. And so the natural vegetation that grows here and our ecology doesn't lend itself as easily to fire start or intensive spread. Now, we are obviously aware and concerned about advances of climate change and that risk landscape changing as time goes on, which is exactly why that's almost basically the hazard type that I have in front of mine when I'm seeking to have the HRVA project approved with the province, is to understand that risk in more detail. We do have, if you look at the maps for the redevelopment zones, I believe, in the community action plan, there is a map there for wildfire risk, and you'll notice there are only a few very small areas of I think the most intense hazard we have is moderate risk rating. And if I look back at some of the previous studies that have been done for wildfire in particular for the area around Nanaimo, We unfortunately, at the time, I believe it was 2019 or 2021, we didn't even meet the threshold for risk to receive grant funding to action, to take on large projects like fuel mitigation and things like that, just due to the scientific research on our ecology. I am interested in engaging with Mosaic and our partners that are responsible for land use in the areas outside of the city boundary, because I'd like to understand the actions that they take. I know from my own personal experience as a wildland firefighter, not just in the province, but here I was stationed on the coast for one summer as well. I believe that the highest risk topography or sort of ecology on the west coast for wildfire is slash blocks, because to basically take burden off of forest companies for their whatever reason, the government has reduced the requirement of them to clear material off of slash blocks, and therefore that woody debris remains on the block and dries out, and then that becomes, I have seen personally and fought intense wildfire behavior on slash blocks and seen it reach a tree line and then sort of die right down. So that's something I'd like to understand more. That's why the HRVA project is something I'm passionate about hopefully getting approved, and that's why I need to engage with Mosaic a bit.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great. Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, you talked about all the different areas that we might have to deal with and who would be in control of those, but I'm wondering who is, from our perspective, who is always the spokesperson for any emergency? Is it always our mayor who would speak to the media?
Oh, for media? One of the sections we can have in the EOC is information officer, and in our roster for all, because we have like all staff in our roster, and the org chart is blank, and then when we activate, we'll take staff from the roster and put them into the org chart. I believe the staff currently earmarked for communications positions our communications staff are earmarked for information officer positions, but we can of course adjust that as we see fit given the incident. So I would defer to.
But the simple answer is yes, it's the mayor.
Yes.
And if it's a big event, it would be delegated. The briefing would take place to the mayor or the acting mayor, and they would do the speaking if it's a major event. Otherwise, it could be an ongoing communication officer thing. But it is definitely, that is the role of council. They're not in EOC, they're to be advised. And the job of the director is to advise them, and then the mayor would be asked to comment on the flood or whatever that is,
Great.
in addition to the work that the communication, because they're on an ongoing basis tasked with the job of liaising with the media and that type of thing. But I think it's always the mayor that's asked to do the.
Great.
And I think they would set up the mayor for success with communication prepared.
Oh, well, exactly. It was just, everything you talked about, it wasn't about that spokesperson to the media.
Yeah.
And yet the first person they're going to phone is the mayor or the acting mayor.
And we
so
would give
it's
him
just
all the
really-
information he needs for
That'd be great.
a coherent message from our
Good.
response.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good presentation.
Great. Seeing any other questions? Yeah, thanks for the great presentation, and good luck with all the work.
Thank you very much.
That brings us to our next item. And when are we scheduled for recess? Is that 2 or 2:30? 3. Okay, we still got a ways to go. So the next item is for Prosperous Nanaimo with the official community plan action items. And Mr. Lindsay, are you introducing this one?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. I'm going to turn it over almost immediately to Ms. Bhopal Singh. I think by now the committee's familiar with this process. We've had a couple of really good sessions with you working through the first few parts of the action plan. So as you saw earlier today with the schedule that Ms. Gurry put in front of you, we're hoping to come back to you and have after today, assuming we wrap up these sections, we're going to come back and have a discussion about what we heard from the neighborhoods and how those could potentially become action plan items in the future, and then ultimately come forward to you with a final draft action plan for the committee to consider overall. So once again, you're going to see suggestions that have come from various documents and have been brought together by staff, but if there's ideas or further suggestions coming from the committee, we'd want to hear those today. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Bhopal Singh.
Good afternoon, Council. So welcome back for another GPC Zoom session on the Integrated Action Plans. One of the things I'd like to remind you of, and also perhaps through the chair get your decision on, is there are some motions that were brought forward by Councillor Brown, and you may wish to deal with those at the end of our session today or at the beginning. So these were ones related to the green section. So I'll just start off with that. And then depending on what you decide, we will then either proceed with that or then get straight into the prosperous section. We have Mr. Corson and the other GMs with us to answer questions. And then after that section, we run into the...
Great. I think we're going to do the additional motions at the end. So we'll start off with the prosperous memo.
Okay, and through the chair with that, I will hand over to Ms. Began to lead the way through this process. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll go over to the next slide and we'll just jump straight into it unless there's some questions about the process, but the process will be the similar as the previous 3 meetings that we've had. Seeing none, we'll move on to a prosperous Nanaimo. So the first topic was...
Just got a question here from Councillor Eastmere before we get into it.
Sorry, thank you. Through the chair, I just had a question about like the process of how the items got picked for the integrated action plan. So when I'm going through city plan, I'm seeing many that aren't captured in the integrated action plan, and I'm just trying to figure out, like, should I just be assuming that those are being addressed in a different way, or we would need to actually identify those as priorities in order to get them into the plan?
Through the chair to Councillor Eastmere. So what staff have done is you've got the whole library of actions, and then you've got the priorities that you're looking at in these GPCs. If there's something in the library of actions or something new that you feel is missing, please feel free to raise it up for your colleagues to make a decision on whether it's a priority in the next 0 to 4 years, or if you see something that you feel is important and it's not anywhere in either beyond 4 years or immediate, please feel free to propose it. This is your plan, so as you've seen, some other councillors have raised and brought forward motions to include actions. Does that help?
That is helpful, yeah, thank you.
Great.
Good to go? Okay, thank you. So we'll start with the economic capital for the immediate actions identified by staff, and there are a few that have financial implications as part of the financial plan, as well as one that has already received council motion from previous council. Thank you. Okay, the results are now in for economic capital. So starting with priority number 172, we have 6 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it, and 1 requesting further discussion, so that action remains. Action number 173, we have 8 in favor of keeping as a priority. Action number 174, all in favor of keeping it as a priority. Action number 175, 6 requesting to keep it as a priority and 2 requesting further discussion. Action number 176, 7 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting further discussion. And lastly, action number 177, 7 in favor of keeping it and 1 requesting further discussion. So all of those actions will remain as priorities. Unless there's further discussion or desire to bring forward a new action.
I've got Councillor Hemmons has got a question or point of discussion. And
Thank you, Chair. On number 175, Commission of Commercial and Industrial Transportation and Logistics Strategy, is that something that we would do in consultation with the port? Or do we own that? Or is that a collaborative effort?
So through the chair to, so this is really about the partnership piece, and this came out of the economic development strategy. And the idea is that we'd be working with the Port Authority, the airport, all the large industrial landowners out there. Because what we find at the moment is each landowner works in their own self-interest. And we feel by bringing them all together, there might be some opportunity for further collaboration, and we'd be able to actually achieve more out of that piece of land than we could individually. So I think there's a role for the city or through the Prosperity Corporation to lead that.
Thank you. That helps. I completely believe in the work. I'm just curious if we're the appropriate lead and who our partners are in it. So thank you. That helps.
Thank you.
Okay, moving forward, go on to the topic of human, social, and environmental capital, as well as business development, given that these two sections are quite short. So we'll now run those Zoom polls. Okay, the results are now in. So for action number 178 for human, social, and environmental capital, we have 4 in favor of keeping it and 4 requesting further discussion. So we'll open up to the committee to have that discussion and to pass a motion once again on that priority.
Got Hammonds? No. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. My question on this is this something that SFN is wanting, or have we had those discussions with them, as well as those discussions with the chamber?
Yeah, so through the chair, when Mr. Smythe was at the chamber entered into and signed an MOU with Sinamuk on a partnership agreement, and one of those was looking at indigenomics. So this seemed like a natural way of collaborating with 2 parties that were already interested in that. So.
But have we had that answer from SFN that they are interested in this, and they want to be a partner, or do they want to be the leader?
They signed the document with the chamber.
No, but not with the city, though, is my question.
Yeah, I think this would be a supporting role for the city.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Councillor Armstrong did ask the questions that I had, so I'll let that part go, but I'm just wondering, why would this be a question? Why wouldn't we? I'm trying to think of a way to phrase it, but I'm just wondering, why wouldn't we? Would there be a reason why we wouldn't? I guess is my question. I wonder sometimes why the question is even there. You know, it just seems it seems like an obvious to me, but I'm not sure that I'm on the right track. I might be missing things in the interpretation of the question.
So through the chair, I think we're just trying to get a better sense of resource allocation. So if you said this wasn't our priority and you wanted us to focus our efforts on another item in this list, then we would do that. So this just, from a staff perspective, it confirms this is an area you want us to spend staff time.
We don't already?
Not on this particular topic, no.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you. Similar line of questioning and just I think a general discomfort with this. I know the MOU between the Chamber and SNNAMO was groundbreaking, and this is a project that they're running with, and I'm just, I can see Cheryl nodding her head. It's, if this is 2 meetings a year, great. Do we need it as a priority in city plan in order to do that, or are we going to invest more staff time in this, and in which case, if we are, I would prefer to see this come through the POG and the nation say to us, this is a program we want you guys to work on. So, thanks, that's all.
Any reply?
Through the chair, sorry, I wasn't too sure if there was a question or I agree with your point, yeah.
Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with the comments of Councillor Hemmons, and I struggle with the city's role in keeping this as a priority. Certainly it's something I would support, but I feel it needs to come through either the POG or the Prosperity Corporation. And I think that's where the discussion should happen. And then if there's a wish to proceed further, then it might come to council, but I don't see us spending time and energy on it by identifying it as a priority here today. That's my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
If there's no other speakers, I'd actually like to refer this to the POG for further conversation at the POG table to see what SFN feels and if they would prefer just for us to be a silent partner or where it's at, and get it from the chief or his representatives as to where they see this as a priority for themselves as well, knowing their capacity issues.
Okay, just a question to staff. Just in terms of referral of an action item on the plan, that's not, it's like a prioritization. I mean, it's still an action item and still pursuing it. Just some clarity on that. And maybe this is a motion that's sort of outside of the plan discussion, and then we can alter kind of the wording there so that it's sort of stepped back a little.
Thank you, Chair. I might ask Mr. Lindsay or Ms. Bhopal Singh to help me out with this, but my understanding is I don't think this motion is out of order. We would be getting you to vote on this again, and based on the discussion, it might not pass anyway. So this is just, I think, a step to make sure before you vote that you want to prioritize this, that it goes to a POG first. And then there might be time then at the end of reviewing all of these integrated action plans that it be brought back to the table. I'm not sure though, so I might defer to.
Through the chair, that's one option. The other option is we could reword this motion regarding having the conversation, but whether or not that's appropriate here, so I think we may not have time before it comes back, but there is the option every year where things get brought forward. And so if council would like to see further discussion to confirm our role with the POG before putting it in, I think that would be fine. It just may not work with our timeline of trying to get you a final draft till June.
Mr. Chairman, can I just add, because I don't want to be in a position where the committee's feeling they have to put things in just because of a schedule. I think it's a good reminder that this is a living document that you're going to review regularly and hopefully update. So if there's something that you'd rather defer to this committee or to another group for comment and bring it back, either if we were able to do it by the time that this thing was brought forward for final, that's great. If it's not and it meant that it had to be considered in the next time, I think that's also fine. So if council wants to defer anything in this list and get further information, I think that's an acceptable approach.
Okay, great. So any further questions? Councillor Hemmons, is that you?
Yeah, a quick one, if I may. Are we going to take all of the priority actions that are relevant to SNNAMO to the POG? Do we have a process to review this with them?
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, what we've got recommended in some ways has gone through SNNAMO in terms of their tie back to the policies that were endorsed in City Plan. However, that doesn't mean that we can't go back to them with some of these in terms of council priorities. But the stage and the setting of city plan and your adoption of that actually does tie quite directly to the actions that you got here.
Absolutely. I'm just, as we're narrowing our focus, I'm curious if there will be a touch point with the nation in terms of these are the priority actions that council has identified in city plan, and here's the interface and how it impacts you and what we're going to need going forward, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
It might, I'm not going to make a motion, but it might be an interesting touch point once we've done this process.
Yeah. Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, I would anticipate that once council has done that, then it's sitting down with the nation, letting them know what the 0 to 4 years look like and beyond, and then working with them to implement those action items. But the ones that we have put forward have in some ways, either through the mayor's leaders table or the other processes with city plan and other committees, have been endorsed by the nation one way or the other. Thank you.
Great. I'm not seeing any other speakers. I think with this one, I think sending it to the POG is one step in the actioning of this action, and it might end the action as Nanaimo is like, we've got no interest in it. I do know that there's an agreement with the Chamber of Commerce in Nanaimo to work on something of this realm, and so it makes sense for the city to be involved with it. You know, for the motion, I'm happy to move to support referring it, and also to add this into the action plan. And it may be a very short action if Nanaimo comes back and says we're not into it. But so I'm going to call the question on the referral. All in favor? Motion carried. And just a question on process, would we still vote on whether we support this current action at this moment, or is there kind of enough information now to move on?
Through the chair, I think your direction has been to defer it, and then at such time we've had the discussions, we come back to you, then you would vote and add it in, whether it makes it into the first cut or the next annual revision. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to action number 179, where we had 6 in favor of keeping it and 2 requesting further discussion, so that one will remain. Then we go to action number 180 under business development. We had 4 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it, and 3 requesting further discussion. So because of the split vote, we'll open that up to discussion, and 1 more vote, please.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I need clarification on that period, because I don't know what you mean by exploit the use of alternative data sets. If you could explain that better to me, maybe I'd be in a better position to vote, because I don't have a clue what you're talking about. I just don't. As everybody I talk to doesn't understand it, so.
It's a question on multiple people's minds, it sounds like, and
so through the chair, we probably shouldn't have used the word exploit, but it's a strong term. So through Tourism Nanaimo and working with the NHA, we're doing what's called the Big Data project, where we're looking at using data to get a better sense of who's coming to Nanaimo and why they're coming, how much they're spending, all that. All the information is available via cell phone data and other large data sets. We're doing the same from an ECDev perspective. We're using software called Environics, which lets us look into, again, large fields of data to get a better sense of who lives in Nanaimo, their actual spending patterns and which groups they fit in, so we can help tailor things better. So really it's just using data that exists to better understand our community and help refine our policies going forward. Exploit was probably not the right term. So,
but follow up on that, I still don't understand how that's going to develop business. Like you're describing the tourism thing, or you're just describing spending habits. You're not describing what is going to bring business here.
Through the chair, if I might try and respond, Councillor Armstrong, this one ties back to a policy and city plan that looks at providing better research and products on demography and economics, so it can inform policy and investment decisions. So it ties back to policy C.5.3.1 in city plan, and I think that's the linkage there.
I guess for
But
me,
if it
it's
can
just
be,
something that should be done naturally. It shouldn't have to be a point in a plan. Like, that should be your normal thing. That part of your decision-making should be gathering that information. Why we have to have it as a point, I disagree with. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Through the chair.
Oh, hold on here. I gotta press the red button.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Through you, I sort of had a similar question. Really, my issue with this one was the wording of it, because it links back to 5.3.2, and I do feel like it's a bit of a rhetorical statement that we should just be using the best data available. But if you do need to have it in there as a priority to make it clear that, you know, we're using comprehensive research products on demography and economy to enable informed policy and investment decisions, like, that's great, but
through the chair, and Mr. Corson can jump in. This is an example of, again, if this is not a priority you wish to see, because you see it as part of what we regularly do, you can opt to not have it in here. I think Mr. Corson would still be able to do what's
yeah, I
needed.
think it's like, it seems like it's inherently a priority. It would concern me if it wasn't, like, so maybe it's good that we just spell it out and say, yeah, we're using the best data possible to make informed decisions, but it feels a little bit cheesy to have it in the integrated action plan. But
So through the chair, I think the intent there was just some of these data sets, it's not like pulling down Census Canada data, which is low cost. These data sets are more expensive to access than typical data. And you know, various departments in the city are starting to access this data, and we're probably ahead of other communities doing it. So certainly agree with your baseline statement that we should be reviewing data all the time and getting a sense of our community, and this is really taking us to the next level. So again, probably not well articulated in that statement.
Through the chair, I have one suggestion, having heard Mr. Corson's explanation, and I think what I'm hearing is this is the word invest in better data than we currently get through other sources free of charge. So, and that's where, if it's a priority, it requires an investment to get that higher information. Would that be correct, Mr. Corson?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. So I voted for having further discussion, which I appreciate. And having heard the discussion around the table, now if we're re-voting, I'll be voting to remove this. I think this should be inherent, and I don't object to the word exploit, that's just semantics, but certainly I think it should be inherent that we use best information that's available. For me, the important action plan was the previous one, 179. That is I think, overriding, and we use to support that the best information that we can get. So that's where I'm at now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff, what are the risks of us pulling this out? Are we committed financially to support this data collection with those other organizations?
So through the chair, the hotel tax, the MRDT money, is being used to fund the big data piece. So that's a commitment till 2025 on the tourism side of things. And then on the staff side, various departments are accessing this data through their own cost centers and budgets. So by removing this item, that work will probably still continue. I don't think you're going to see a lack of work taking place because of that. Yeah.
Thank you. So we can remove the priority and the work will remain exactly as is.
That's what I would anticipate, yes.
Okay, if I may, I'll just say I read this. I firmly believe that we need all the data we can get to support business, and I think it's worth investing in. So I'm going to vote to keep this, but the way I interpreted this is there's data, for instance, around Airbnbs that we could pay to access to see what is the impact of Airbnbs on our rental stock. Is it reasonable if we keep this, that initiatives like that could further fall under this?
Yeah, through the chair, that's exactly what we're doing. We're accessing AirDNA, et cetera, to see what the impact of that industry is. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm just gonna state, I prefer we keep this in. It's interesting that we can pull it out and it's not, the work isn't gonna change. I think that speaks volumes, but from a prioritization and strategy standpoint, I think it's imperative that we invest in getting the data that's gonna allow us to do our work the best. So I'm in support of keeping this in. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perino?
Thank you, Chair. And I'm actually surprised that this to me is a university project, and I would think that they would be all over it to find out, you know, just the different data around Nanaimo and what, you know, all these kinds of things. So I'm kind of surprised why we're doing it, and I'm sure that they're doing it as well. I'm trying to think back to some of my university days, but it just seems to me like, you know, the data that they're using is a great learning tool for students. Just a thought.
Great, thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. Yeah, I won't be supporting this. I don't think it should even be in there. I think it makes us look actually that we're way behind the ball by putting that in. Because every place you expect people to use your best data, and if you need more budget, then you come and you ask for more budget, because we don't even have a budget assigned to it. Like, what's the cost factor to it? So to me, whether we put it in or not, it's irrelevant, because they're still going to have to come forward to request a budget increase anyhow. So I just read it and I think, oh God, they must not have been doing anything right when I read that. So it's to me, any good business always uses the best information available, and to have to put it in the plan to me is, no offense, kind of juvenile. Thank you.
I see Councillor Brown with his hand up. Welcome. And then we'll go to Councillor Hemmons.
Thanks, Chair. And sorry, Council and everybody for being late today. I'll be supporting it just for the sole reason that I think there's a whole bunch of granular details in these plans that, you know, is probably diving a little too deep into the organization for us as councillors and the focus on sort of governance and setting the policy decisions. So I just find it odd that this would be one that we remove, because I think there's a whole host of other ones that if we were to apply the same lens, we could discuss them and add them and remove them. So for that reason and that reason alone, I'll be supporting it. Obviously, it's identified action for meeting some of the larger policy goals. Do I think it should be in here? Probably not. I would just assume that it would get done, and but it is, and so yeah, in order to meet those larger policy goals, which I overall generally support, and I will be supporting this. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hemmons.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to push back against the idea that this makes us seem like we don't know what we're doing, because I'm reading this as exploiting, and again, the wording, the use of alternative data sets. So data sets that we typically would not access, and we're accessing them with partners to look at specific pieces of our community, the economy, whatever, we could, you know, Airbnb rentals, all that stuff. So I actually, I think it's important to keep in, again, not saying it'll go forward without it being in, but this isn't about the data that we typically collect to do our business. This is about going deeper and allowing us to do our business better with our partners. So strongly in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this as well. I think that you know, it is going to govern, you know, additional budget for accessing these data sets, and also staff time, you know, putting it together. You know, as an economic development department, one of the things that we do is provide data to businesses, and that and also informs our own policy, and people do look to us for that. And so if we can provide, you know, the most expansive set for, you know, businesses looking for investment into the community and also expansion, I think that is an important addition. So thank you. Not seeing any other questions. Call the question. All in favor? Oppose? Oh, all in favor of keeping, invest the use of alternative data sets to provide new insights and make better decisions. The item 180. Everybody clear on that's what we're voting on? Okay. So all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Armstrong and Thorpe. Motion carried.
Thank you, everyone. We'll now move on to innovation and technology. And we'll launch that poll.
I'm not getting any options for number 4 except to keep.
Could be.
Yes.
Try to scroll down.
No, I tried.
Yeah, no, it's just a suggestion from tech staff.
He didn't scroll.
Okay, I'm leaving.
Thank you, IT.
After all that, I'll probably So nice to have a fellow Luddite.
All right, the results are now in, and thank you, everyone, for dealing with the technology that we've brought forward to you for these polls. So in regards to action number 181 for innovation and technology, we had 6 in favor of keeping it as priority, 2 to remove it, and 1 to further discuss, so that one will remain. Action number 182, under the same topic, 6 to keep, 2 to remove, 1 further discussion. Action number 183, we had a 3-way split, so 3 in favor of keeping it, 3 for removing, and 3 requesting further discussion. So I'll open up to the committee to have further discussion and to pass a motion on that action, please.
Great. Councillor Hammond, is this a carryover?
Yeah, no, I have
Okay.
questions, thank
Yep.
you. Number 181, again, this is similar to the Chamber and Indigenomics. My question there is this at the library's insistence, or part of the library, the university's insistence? Is this a request from them? What does it look like to be involved in this? So that was just a further discussion is needed. Would you like me to just do the section or each question?
Through the chair, it's just regarding action number 183, which we had the split vote. Action 181 passed
Yeah.
already.
And Councillor Hammond, I think we can take questions like that after we go through the ones that were like.
Okay, sorry, I just want to, you're right, I
contentious.
wanted to note the ones that I said further discussion is needed and why, but okay, third, the one that's split, promote development of a downtown hub involving the tech sector and complementary sectors and services. I voted to remove this. I think a tech sector and a downtown hub, these are buzzwords, and I'd like to know exactly what this means and who our partners are, if this is something we're gonna pursue. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Is that a question to staff?
Yes, please. Just general statements today.
So through the chair, certainly, I think we wanted to include this one because this is an area where I think from an economic development perspective, we've spent a lot of staff time and financial resources in over the years. And it's included in this in our economic development strategy as well. So I think it's very helpful for us to get some council direction on this item, if this is something you'd want us to continue with or not, because it's certainly, this in itself could be quite a mammoth project. Yes.
If I may, I need you to define the Mammoth Project. I'm not certain what this is.
Yeah, so through the chair, this would be my perspective of it, but it would involve working with the technology to community to understand what it would take to get them to invest in the downtown core. It might involve the city actually putting in infrastructure to attract them. Might be the city, in the past, we actually leased a building and retrofitted the building and created a tech incubator. So we did all that in the past. So that's an example. We have in our economic development strategy talked about the idea of creating a downtown fiber network, which buildings could plug into, and then that might just be up for the market to decide at that point if people feel that's enough of incentive to stimulate development. It also could involve the city providing business support for startups, to have business counseling, et cetera, for people who are starting their tech businesses. So it's a very broad piece, and if we were going to do this for council, we'd certainly be giving a bit of a framework and spelling it out a bit more for you. Yeah.
Thank you. If I may, I'm going to stick with my vote of removing this, and if this were deeply important, I would expect this to come from prosperity, and it would be broken down into several pieces rather than just promote development of a downtown hub. So yeah, that's my vote. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I agree with the points of Councillor Hammonds. I too voted to remove it. I was just reading in Fortune magazine that tech sector is going downhill fast with remote work, as well as it's being outsourced to other countries. So we've tried this ever since I've been on council, and it's never succeeded. So I don't know why we would think it would now, especially with the change since COVID, where it is being outsourced. It's not the big, as a matter of fact, people are searching for jobs in the tech industry now because it's not the big thing it used to be. So I don't think it's a good use of dollars or staff time, so I'm going to remain voting against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I voted to remove this one as well as the other two, with the exception of 4, for the exact same reasons. It takes more than wishful thinking to see an industry realized. When you look at competitive advantages with respect to technology, outside of industrial tech, we have none. And so I think this is the reason why it's been a lot of pushes and failures, is because it's a very small market, and there is other markets that are going to do it better. The type of university we have isn't one that, I think when we talk about tech, isn't one that pumps out that type of graduates. There are other universities. So I think when you step back and you think about just from pure infrastructure perspective, from pure human resources perspective, there's a reason why this is a continual, not a failure, but an initiative that never gains much traction, is because the market is simply there, and you can't just self-generate this because you want. So for that reason, I think it would be spending effort and energy and resources on an area that would have a high degree or a lot of risk with respect to seeing failure. Thanks so much.
And are you back on?
I'll make a motion. Thanks, Chair. I'll move to remove this as a priority action item.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll just say I think if it is something that does have a realistic potential, I know we have put a lot of effort in this in the past, and there is some work that has been done, but I think it can be brought back by the Prosperity Corporation as a recommendation if this is needs further effort. Calling the question to remove. All in favor? Opposed? Mayor Krog opposed. Motion carried.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And the last action was 184 as it relates to innovation and technology, and we had 6 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove, and 2 requesting further discussion. So unless there's further discussion requested for this topic or any additional actions, we'll move on to the next topic.
A holdover, okay. So no questions on this. I think we can proceed.
Okay, we'll now move on to the topic of placemaking and investment attraction. Stop that one. As well as tourism. The poll is now live. Just to confirm through the chair, is Councillor Brown still voting? Or are we only waiting on 8 committee members?
I've completed my vote.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, the results are now in. So for the topic of placemaking and investment attraction, action number 185, we had 6 in favor of keeping, 1 for removing, 2 for further discussion. Under the topic of tourism, ongoing action, we had 7 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it, and 1 requesting further discussion. For action number 187, we had 8 in favor of keeping it. If you just scroll down, thank you. And 1 requesting further discussion. Action number 188, we had 8 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it. Action number 189, all in favor of keeping it. And lastly, action number 190, 7 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting further discussion. Are there any other actions or discussions regarding the Prosper section before we move on to city structure? Seeing none?
Just a question.
Councillor Hemmons, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm curious, number 187, again, just a curiosity. If we take this one out, are we not going to work with the nation to promote Saskatchewan? Yeah, I totally hear that, and I'm just saying, I requested further discussion. I'm just curious. I'm curious about the validity of policy points that if we pull out, it doesn't matter.
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, beg your pardon. I'll ask Mr. Harding to help with this one. What we're trying to do is determine in the next 4 years what your priorities are that we invest time and resources to furthering. So while some actions continue on because they're part of general operations and others may still continue, it's what do you want to see us really focus on moving forward on. So Mr. Harding, you've got a bit more background on this is the Saskatchewan work and the pros and cons of whether this is in the priority versus in the general set of actions.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Hemmons, as Ms. Volpelsing says, really just recommits council to saying Saskatchewan is a priority. And there's a number of objectives, and council's always been supportive, even for reestablishing of the board that needs to continue to still needs to be reestablished, as well as with Tourism Nanaimo, with 2 councillors on it, sending that message back that Saskatchewan is still a priority, and just reinforces that we're going to keep working on it.
Thank you.
So through the chair, we can keep going.
Councilor Perino?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, hold on.
No, it's there. I'm asking, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, I want to go on to the next one, but for the first and second question, 185 and 186, there was someone who voted against it, voted to remove this. And I'd be very interested to hear from that person why they voted to remove it. Just from that perspective of I'm surprised, and I'm wondering if I'm missing something. So 185 and 186, so that's the first and second question, and someone voted to remove this, and I'm just surprised, and I would just really appreciate hearing why they might have voted to remove it. Yeah, I'd just be really interested in your opinion as to what, because I'm not sure I'm getting it all. That's why I'm just.
It's already being done, and we're already under contract with them to do it. So to me, it's not a priority when we've already allocated the budget. We're in contract with them. So to me, it wasn't a priority. It's already being done. Same thing for the others. It's like, why are we putting something in that we've already given a budget to? We've already made it through a priority by having a contract with tourism. So to me, it was just not needed. And that's the same thing with number 2. It's already being done. And we've dedicated a large portion of a budget to it. So I don't see it as being required. That's why.
So I really appreciate hearing this. So I'm just wondering, Chair, through you, if I could ask staff. So, assuming Councillor Armstrong is absolutely correct, can you answer the question as to why?
Well, yeah, through the chair. So I guess if council was not interested in the MOU with the Hospitality Association and Tourism and Nanaimo, that'd be very helpful to know, because I was just there for 2 hours this morning discussing the MOU, and I could certainly divert my resources elsewhere. So if council felt that was not an area where you wish to spend staff time, then we could work in other key files. So that'd be helpful to know.
I don't think that's
not how we understand. So.
Sorry, I don't think that's not what the question was. The question was, if we're already doing this, why are we putting it in again? Councillor Armstrong might have a better response.
Well, for me, when you said that, we're already required by contract in MOU to do it. So to me, it doesn't need to be there. If we wanted it removed, then to me, I'm removing it not because it's already being done. We've already made a determination that it's a priority because we signed contracts, we signed MOUs. So unless we want to break them, then that would be done by motion of council. So to me, it doesn't make sense to have it in there when we've already put our money where our mouths are, so to speak. And to me, it's just ongoing business. To me, anyhow, it's just the way I see it.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
No, I think
Thank you,
Councilor Perino had a question of clarification to a member. I think we voted on this and it's going forward and we affirmed it. So unless there's anything else that needs to be added, so you see Mr. Lindsay with his hand on.
Mr. Chairman, I think just what I would add, because I kind of see a theme coming up in the discussion, and what's not on the table in front of you here on the screen, but in the table and the attachment is this breakdown between what's ongoing. So what is council is already committed to versus what is new? And we had the same, internal discussion and debate, I think, as you're having now is, well, do you include things that you're already doing in an action plan or do you not? And you can go both ways on this. The thought process here is, well, if you're doing a bunch of things and the point is creating a work plan, you should at least acknowledge the things that are actively in progress and being worked upon. There's probably no right answer on that or not, but that's kind of the rationale. And I'm sorry, it's not, when you look at the questions in front of you, doesn't break up, which ones are ongoing and council's already committed to, and maybe it'll be a regular thing versus something that's new. So certainly when you look at it in the breakdown, we tried to separate those out in terms of an ongoing commitment.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Great, thank you. I've got a few speakers here. Councillor Eastmere, were you adding to this conversation, or is it a new item?
It's not a question.
Oh.
Yes, thank you. referring back to city plan, there's C5.5.5, and it's not captured in the action plan under any of the points. And then that one is to support businesses involved in the production, marketing, and/or delivery of artistic and cultural products, such as art, music, theater, festivals, and special events, and then community pride and awareness, blah, blah, blah. Like, I feel like that, like the first part of that is super, super important, because we can make a brand and, you know, coordinate it all we want, but if we don't have the people actually like doing the work of creating the festivals and creating the art, then all the branding doesn't matter if there's no content. So that's a piece that I think really needs to be put back in, added under the immediate placemaking and investment attraction section for 0 to 4 years, because I think supporting the businesses who are doing this work is a really critical part of this. So
Okay,
I'm
thank
not
you.
sure how we handle that, whether it's
Do you have a particular, I think we're come to the end of this particular section, and so this is the appropriate time to put forward motions on Prosperous Nanaimo. So if you have one that you'd like to put forward.
Yes, so I would put forward a motion that we add under placemaking and investment attraction, under the immediate actions, we add an additional point that captures C5.5.5 around supporting businesses involved in the production, marketing, and/or delivery of artistic or cultural products such as art, music, theater, festivals, and community events.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Hemmons.
Yeah, basically what I said. We need to support the businesses who are creating these attractions and supporting our community, and this is I think an important thing for us to do in the next 0 to 4 years is we're working on the branding and marketing. People need to have reasons to come here, and that's what these businesses are involved in doing.
Okay, thank you. I got Councillor Hemmons and then Councillor. Now, is that just a question of staff? Is that motion clear enough direction? Like it's a policy point that requires an action for taking the next step? I'm seeing some nods. I don't know if staff would like to respond to that before we.
Yeah, Chair, I'll give it a try, and Mr. Corson next. So the real key point, this is supporting the businesses, where so many of the objectives we've got in the festivals and events and others and cultural sides is supporting organizations. So I think it would just we'd have to go back as staff and look at that and bring back something that's a little more detailed on specifically to businesses.
Yeah, through the chair, exactly. I think it'd be good for us just to probably refine that a bit and come back with a more specific project for you to endorse, so we could consider that for the next meeting for the final.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sounds like sufficient direction. Any more? I got Councillor Hemmons, Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think I understand the intent of Councillor Eastmuir's suggestion. To me, that is, I thought, covered off under Action 186, and maybe it comes down to the distinction between supporting organizations as opposed to businesses, which of course we cannot directly support for-profit businesses. So I personally, I don't see the need of this. I think it is covered, but unless I'm misreading it, or staff can correct me, I'm good with what we've done so far. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Councillor Perino?
Chair, thank you, Chair. The struggle that I'm having is, I think the motion is, the intent of the motion is very good, but the problem I have is that we never want to overstep what the Chamber is doing, what tourism is doing, what Prospera is doing. We want to make sure that we support them in the work that they're doing. And if we start, my fear is that we don't want to jump right into the arena of actually doing the work. We just want to be supportive of those that are doing it. So I'm concerned about voting for this, but the intent is good, but I'm not sure that that's our role. It's a little like saying I'm going to go over and dig the hole for the pipe when Mr. Sims would clearly say, let us do it. Support us and get out of the way. And that's what I think we should be doing as a council versus stepping into it.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing any other speakers to this. I'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Armstrong, Thorpe and Perino, and Mayor Croak. Motion carried. No, Councillor Brown was in favor, yeah. Okay. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question through you to staff. So at our very first GPC where we started doing this process, we, Councillor Gesselbrock introduced a number of motions around circular economy, and just reviewing the material for today, I note that actually in Prosperous Nanaimo we have 2 policies related to circular economy, and I'm wondering, I'd like to get staff's opinion on elevating those in the action plan now that we've also put them in the environmental section. So those are policies C5.25 and C5.26.
Chair, are those part of the ones that we are including at the end of the meeting? No? Okay.
Through the chair, would you like us to read out those policies so it's clear for everybody? Okay.
Sure. Or I can read them. So okay. C.5.2.5, support business opportunities for a green economy, including green energy generation and promotion of energy conservation. And that one, I'm thinking of the motion around the reclamation of wood out of demolition. And the second one is support the development of a circular economy in Nanaimo, building on the principles of donut economics. And again, the earlier policies that we elevated into the action plan match those.
And apologies, through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, are these from City Plan or from the Integrated Action Plan Library that you're pulling these? I think really from City Plan? Excellent, thank you. So through the chair, the option is that you can direct staff to go read these policies and come up with actions, just like the similar one we just passed, for then the committee to consider the revised action wording, as this is a policy wording and we don't want to include policies in the action plan, we want to include action. So if you can just provide us direction through a motion to go forward and work with other staff on what that action would look like, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. Just a comment on that. You know, I do know that Ms. Manhas has been part of the Circular Cities Initiative, and there is projects being worked on within the business development section on this, and there was a prior motion, council motion on developing a circular economy strategy. In particular, there were some items business related, and I think having that be apparent in the action plan, one, affirming the work that's, you know, ongoing, and that potentially could be expanded. And I think with the Prosperity Corporation having circular economy as a principle, I think that there is some work that could go. So I'd be supportive if there's a motion to looking for staff to come back with actions.
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, and excuse me if I haven't quite hit the mark here, one of the actions you did support under green was to work with organizations such as Circular Cities and Regions project to promote the circular economy. Does that help get us forward?
Thank you. That's my question for you. So we put we elevated policies out of the library into the action plan. Now we're in a different section, and I noticed that we still have policies related to that we could elevate again, that reinforce that we've agreed we're going to do that work. So,
through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, would you like to see this particular action that you have prioritized in the green section reflected also in Prosperous?
I think they are. I think what I'm suggesting we move up is a mirror of what we put in the green section, and I'm curious if they need to go up together.
So through the chair, I wouldn't recommend having duplicity in the action plan. It's already a very long document. There are many policies and actions that could go into one section or another. It really just landed on where staff thought the strongest policy supported the work. So as long as the scope of that action that you did prioritize in the green section encompasses the scope of what you're envisioning, then staff have the direction to do the work. If it doesn't, that's where we need to amend the action so it's clear to staff exactly the scope of work that you'd like to do around circular economy.
Thank you for that clarification.
Just a comment, you know, I think if we have Ms. Manhas is working on projects, I do think it should be reflected in the work plan of the
Priority plan?
The priority plan for the business section, the economic section, and there was a suggestion that we could move a motion saying, you know, for staff to come back with action items within this for council to review around actioning those policies. Would that be an amenable motion to move to provide direction?
Through the chair, I think that, well, one thing I'd like to point out is the word integrated, and what you're picking up on is that some of throughout this document, we had to pick categories to put things in, and there were several actions that could have fit under one or more goal areas. And so when the action plan is finished, and in fact, if you look at the document you have, it will show the related areas. So the question about where you'd like to have it sit, I think is fluid. And so if you'd like to see the circular economies more focused and prosperous, I don't see an issue with that. Now, whether we need to come back to you with some additional actions other than the one sitting in green, that's up to you, and we can take a look at them and see if we can come back at the next meeting with them, and add that onto the neighborhoods for discussion, if we can do that in time. I'll look to Mr. Corson a little bit, but I do think we've got something to work with there.
If I may, I'm actually not going to move a motion, and that might preempt. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't going to miss opportunities. Can you mic me?
Oh, sorry. Hold on.
It's on.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to miss opportunities by not elevating them in different groups. But I'm hearing you say that it was captured under green and IMO, so I don't need to elevate this. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, there are many actions where there'll be multiple departments working together. That's the interconnectedness of city plan. So just because one action falls under the green section does not mean other departments won't be working with that department to help and, you know, bring that initiative forward.
Great, thank you,
Yeah,
Councillor Armstrong.
I was just going to say, it's already been captured in the green portion, so that's where it should stay, in my opinion. Otherwise, we could put like public safety into every single one of these things too. So we need to leave it alone, or we're going to get this plan so big it's not going to make any sense. We've already captured what we want. We all agree to the circular economy. There's already motion, so we don't need it under prosperous, my opinion. Thanks.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other speakers on this section, so I think we're good to move into the city structure.
Okay, so through the chair, do we want to take a break, or do we want to start the city structure section as we're about 2:45?
Chair, because we have this next section as well as those list of items still to be dealt with, did you want to take the break now? A little bit early before.
Pleasure of council, if you want to keep pounding through it or take a break. I'm looking at the majority of people. Break? Okay, we're taking a break.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, buddy!
Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh, man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh.
Go, 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 go!
Penalty shot!
Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got it, kid? Use the lid.
What we have here is the Real Ice technology that was installed at the Nanaimo Ice Center. It allows us to use cold water from traditionally hot water that we used to use for making ice. Basically, the water will come in through the bottom, go in through a vortex idea, making the air bubbles microscopic in size, which makes a better, more dense sheet of ice.
Differences that you'll see with the Real Ice is there's less snow developed, so that's easier for cleaning, and also it's a denser, harder, clear ice. So the ice skaters will certainly enjoy that. And the city plans to implement Real Ice at our other 2 arenas as well. Some of the other efficiencies we've implemented in this facility are LED lights in some areas, and we've also, in the last few years, installed a higher efficiency refrigeration system, which lowers our energy costs. Both Zambonis at our facility are now electrically operated, so there's no harmful emissions, and they're very quiet as well. So what this means for the city is that we're able to use less energy and also reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more beneficial to the environment.
We're here at Bruce and Dundas. Somebody's stolen the street names that were here, so we're here to replace them. Our sign shop has just generated us 2 signs, so I'm going to go through the process of putting it together and reinstalling the street names. First thing, we got to center the signs. We do everything on this truck. We've got all the equipment on here to build, install, remove, repair, whether it's street signs, street names, posts, banners, Christmas decorations, and so forth. I'm going to basically just put the sign in the brackets, and we'll be doing both signs, of course. So I've got a cross bracket that I'm going to put in, and then add the top sign, which is this street we're on, Dundas. Sorry, do the same there. We put the street that we're coming up to on the bottom, so they all basically have the same. The cross street will be on the top. We got to put some bolts in to secure them so nobody will steal the street name. We're ready to go. Just put this back and we'll go out and install this where the missing one is. Every year we do what we call a stop sign survey, where we go around and check all the stops. We clean them, make sure they're in the right spots, in good condition, not bent, and we also clean the street names, make sure they're good. As we're doing that, if there's ones that we decide we want to replace, we do that at that time. This year we're looking at approximately about 120 sets. It's very expensive to do, but we're continually, weekly changing street names because of either them getting damaged or people breaking them and taking them. So I'll put this on, and then I put a bolt through to secure it to the post. There we go. And that's good, we're done. Dundas and Bruce Ave are now ready to go.
Welcome to the city's South Fork Water Treatment Plant. This is where we take water that we would collect in our lakes and rivers, pipe it, we filter it and treat it before we send it off to the city's distribution system in your taps. This facility actually does a better job than most home filtration systems. The water that comes into your home that you use every day, that you bathe in every day, that you wash your clothes in every day, is cleaner than anything you can get anywhere.
Here you see filtration in action. It's kind of like watching paint dry. There's nothing to really see. But if you look in the tank, you'll see the froth on the top. That's dissolved organic matter, and when we aerate the tank, that froths up, and that's why that's up there.
We take all the little particles, all the organic matter, any insects or bugs that might be in the water, and pathogens that we're trying to filter out, they're all gone. We filter the water using a series of membranes.
So what we're looking at here is a membrane filtration module. So when I talk about the membranes filtering the water, this is what we're filtering the water with. And while you might think that the water flows through like the baleen of a whale, it's not true. These are hollow fiber membranes. So each of these little tiny strands are hollow, just like a shoelace. And the membrane is wrapped around the outside of these tiny little hollow fibers. So these sit in a bath of water, raw water, and then we pull the water through the wall of the straw or the shoelace, and then it travels along and it collects in this vessel at the end here. And this hole at the end is where we pull the water out.
And the membranes are like an almost impermeable waterproof layer that we pull the water through. So now we're just left with clean, pure drinking water. Take care.
Come back here, and we're going to the next section, which is city structure. And so, go for it.
All right, so we're going to start with the next topic under city structure, which is future land use designations. And we have 2 ongoing and 1 immediate action for the committee to consider. So we'll now run the poll. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
What's that? We'll get an email on it.
Just through the chair, for clarity, is Councillor Brown voting? Okay.
The response I just received was no.
Thank you. Okay, so all the results are now in. So in regards to future land use designations, action number 191, we have 7 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting further discussion. Action number 192, all in favor of keeping it. And action number 193, 7 in favor of keeping it and 1 requesting to remove it. So all those actions will remain in that section. Unless there's further discussion or additional actions to bring forward, we'll move on to area and neighborhood planning. Seeing none, okay, we'll now run the poll for those 2 topics. Okay, the results are now in for this poll. So for action number 194, as it relates to area planning for Woodgrove Urban Center, we have 7 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it. Action number 195, which is area planning for Southgate Urban Center, all in favor of keeping it. Now we move on to neighborhood planning. So action number 196 relates to the implementation of the Neighborhood Association Support Policy. We have 6 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it, and 1 requesting further discussion. Action number 197, we have 5 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it, and 2 requesting further discussion. So that action remains. We move on to action number 198, 5 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it, and 2 requesting further discussion. And then lastly, we have action number 199 for neighborhood planning under the immediate, 3 in favor of keeping it, 3 requesting to remove it, and 2 requesting further discussion. So as that vote was split, we'll ask for further discussion, and I'll just read the action out. It says, explore expanding geothermal energy in the Vancouver Island University Secondary Urban Centre.
Ben?
Mayor Crowe.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'm just curious to know, to be quite candid with you, what would be our role in exploring geothermal energy? And if so, if we've done something to date of any substance, what is it?
The Chair, I can answer to Mayor. So we've looked at it, we've had a few exploratory looks at it with what we're talking about was the VIU tied into the mine shafts for the geothermal. If school district ND 68, NDSS high school gets redeveloped, we see there's some real opportunities to do something with the new high school and tying into the aquatic center. And we think at that time there might be enough economies of scale and cost savings it would be an opportunity to look into tying into the same system. Mr. Sims can also answer some questions on it.
So if I may, Chair, as I understand it, and the reason we have involvement in this is the long-term potential that we might be able to use this as a substitute for natural gas or electricity, whatever else we're using to heat the pools, etc.
Chair, through the chair, it's correct. And we did some exploratory work about 3 or 4 years ago on it. Just wasn't enough to make the payback, but we do believe over time there will be opportunities, specifically if there's some major redevelopment of the high school.
Thank you. You flipped my vote.
Councillor Hammonds? Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. Does any of this require provincial approvals or anything, or is it just something we can go without the provincial approvals? And if it does need provincial approvals, what has their stance been on geothermal?
The Chair, Councillor Armstrong, I believe you will need provincial approval because we're tying into a water system, but it is a closed loop system, so I'm not sure how much approvals are held back from it, geothermal. And then, of course, there'll be data now for the number of years with VIU operating theirs for a number of years now. So there will be approvals required, yes.
Yeah, thank you. That switches my vote to in favor.
Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair, and a question through you to Mr. Harding. So what I don't understand is why the question is actually coming to us. I mean, obviously, geothermal energy is obvious to consider when we go to do new buildings like the school, like the pool, whatever the case is. But why wouldn't that just be a part of the process? I guess is my question. Why would it come to us at all? Why wouldn't it just be part of the process of whenever you do a concept for a new build?
Here to Councillor Perino, I think because it would take a major payback period. This council wouldn't necessarily see the benefits of it. It would be a long-term payback of a system like this. Plus, it would also require us to work with school board, VIU, would be a variety of groups and organizations to be involved with it. And so it would be a major investment in a system that would be a long-term payback. And so I think it's, again, like a lot of things, do you want to keep it on these kind of opportunities front and center so all staff see that it's important for us to look at these? Okay. Or do we think, okay, let's work on some other things?
Okay, no, that's helpful. That changes my vote too.
And Mr. Sims may have some other details on that I don't have.
It makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm still uncertain on this, and I don't think I will change my vote. We're talking here about policy and action plans, and it seems to me that this would be very specific to particular projects, and those projects would come in front of council for discussion and approval, and at that time there would be this type of vote or discussion at least. So I just don't see the sense of it being here, so I don't think I'll support it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. So the existing system at VIU is is it scalable? Like, is it something that can be built upon for the city to access power from?
Chair, Councilor Manley, definitely opportunities to build on their experience, and it's in the same mine system. So we'd be tying into the same mine shafts. We're very close by to the main mine shafts. And so we'll be building off their experience and the systems and experience that they've had over the years working on that specific geothermal opportunity.
And in past discussion about this, there was concern about sulfur in the water system, I think, and wear and tear on pipes. Is that something that we've learned more about?
Yeah, once again, Councilor Manley, I think those learning opportunities from what VIU's experienced and the corrosive nature of the water in the mine shafts, all those types of things would be learning curves that VIU's gone ahead on us on.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I will be supporting this. You know, there's a lot we could be doing with respect to, you know, energy reduction and how we consume and use energies. We're not in a position where we really need to be exploring these new technologies. We're actually in a very good position otherwise. So I just think when you place it all in context and you think of all the challenging items that we need to work through and the work that staff need to be doing, I just can't see this being a priority in 4 years, nor can I see it being a priority in 15. So for that reason, I'm going to support it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I support these initiatives. I think, you know, VIU's sort of helped blaze the path, and there could be, yeah, great opportunity in this. And, you know, there's a lot of other initiatives that we can be doing to reduce emissions, but I think this is valuable to pursue it, and it'd be pretty neat, you know, the coal mines that were made here, if we can utilize, you know, them in a way for an alternative energy source, that'd be a pretty great story to tell. Thank you.
So through the chair, if we can have a vote on that action.
All right, so we'll vote on the current action as it is. So all in favor of keeping it in? And opposed? Councillor Thorpe? And Councillor Brown opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that motion, or that action, apologies, will remain. Okay, we'll move on to the last topic. Development permit and heritage conservation areas. And there's there's one action under that topic, and then we have the final topic, which is financial mechanisms and community benefits. So we'll now run that poll. Okay, the results are now in. So as it relates to action number 20 for development permit and heritage conservation area, we have 8 in favor of keeping it, 1 requesting to remove it. And then lastly, number action 201, financial mechanisms and community benefits, we have 8 in favor of keeping it and 1 requesting further discussion. Are there any additional discussions or actions brought forward under the heading of city structure? Seeing none, then this is a great opportunity to bring forward the previous actions. Oh, we'll go over to Sheila over here.
That's great.
Thank you. First, we'll bring up those motions for consideration that have already been discussed, that still need to be discussed, and just a little bit of process, and then I'll turn it back over to the team to answer any specific questions that you may have regarding those motions. So I'm just going to bring up a document where you received time, so you could have it in front of your, on your screens in front of you today. And so the ones that have already been dealt with, the additional information motion, one of those have been dealt with. Amending action motions, so all of those listed in front of you right now have already been dealt with. I'm not sure if we could make it a little bit bigger, Natalie. I can't see it from here. Thank you. So those ones have been dealt with already. Then the next page is motions for consideration. So these have been brought forward by Chair Gesselbrock and Councillor Brown. So these are additional information motions. And then there's a couple just below, and we'll go back to the start, Natalie, adding or removing motions. There's these ones that need to be moved to be added to the integrated action plan. So you have that C.1.138, develop a program to encourage the adoption of e-bikes with equity considerations be added as a priority action for implementation in the 0 to 4 years. So that one was under, I believe, a Green Nanaimo. And that recommendation 1 through 3 of the Mayor's Leaders Table Donut Economics Working Group be incorporated into the priority action plan, and a report be prepared for council outlining an implementation schedule for the remaining recommendations that were included in that report. So those are the adding and removing. So if we go back to the previous page, there's some additional motions to the next one. Yeah, motions for consideration. So I'll turn it over to you, Chair, for discussion, and or Councillor Brown, and then staff can answer any questions that you might have about that. And I can answer any process questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Ms. Gurry. So, yeah, any council members wanting to put forward motions on these items at this time for debate?
So Chair, just for clarification, are you wanting to put these forward, or Councillor Brown wanting to put these forward? And then they could be moved, seconded, and debated?
There's a couple that I'd like to put forward. Yeah, I think Councillor Brown might having connection issues, but
okay.
We hear from him.
He's back now, yeah.
Chair, thank you. Sorry, I've moved into a better Wi-Fi spot. I did have one question of clarification around information reports with respect to legal review, both for development permit area with respect to GHG reductions and low carbon energy systems. I understand they were voted previously at the GPC, and I wasn't sure the outcome of that vote.
So through the chair, there was one motion. It's just now up on the screen. I'm not sure if you can see it. So that one was defeated. So process for that would be either a councillor that was absent for this vote, which I believe you were, Councillor Brown. I believe Councillor Manley and Councillor Armstrong were also absent for this vote. Could bring it back for reconsideration at the committee level. As well as a council, you have the right to consider any motion at a council table. So those are your two process options should you wish to have that reconsidered today or looked at a council level. That could be done as well.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to request a reconsideration of that here at the committee level. That way not having to take up the bandwidth of the council table for that.
And so just process-wise, Chair, you would have a vote on whether or not you would allow the reconsideration. Should that pass, this motion would immediately be on the floor. So the motion on the floor right now that Councillor Brown is asking for is a motion for reconsideration. If that's seconded, you would vote, and there's no debate on that. You would vote, and should it pass, then you can debate and consider the motion. It'll be on the floor.
Yes, point of order.
Okay.
When a motion has been defeated and it's wanting to be brought back to the table, that the person, a person who voted to have it defeated needs to bring it back to the table.
So I believe that it's people who are absent or that...
or on the prevailing
side. On the prevailing side, so it's in order.
Okay.
Seconded, Councillor Manley.
Just a question on procedure as well, because my understanding, and I could be wrong, was that committee couldn't be bought for reconsideration, that only council could be.
Committee to committee can reconsideration. You can't bring a reconsideration of a committee motion to a council motion.
Thank you. That's good. Thanks.
Great. So the motion on the floor is just to consider the reconsideration of this motion being brought forward. So all in favor? Opposed? Mayor Crowe, Councillor Armstrong, and Councillor Perino opposed. So motion carried.
So now the motion is on the floor.
And does it need to be moved and seconded?
No, no, because the motion to reconsider passed, it is now immediately on the floor, and this can be debated. It is in order. If you wish to debate this, you can debate this motion.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. As the mover, Councillor Brown, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to speak to this motion. Essentially, this is just a request for more information with respect to a policy item. We've had a lot of back and forth at the council table that has spanned multiple council turns around the usage of buildings, and when it comes to energy and the type of energy that is sourcing those buildings. Undoubtedly, we know that oil, but in particularly with respect to new builds, natural gas does add and contributes to our GHG emissions as a city and as a community. And when we look at that, the efforts that citizens have made over previous years since the city has been trying to tackle climate action, unfortunately, those efforts have been essentially neutralized by the expansion of natural gas infrastructure within the city. There are some use cases that very much need natural gas, and the intention of regulating those connections isn't to an immediate moratorium on it, which I think it's sometimes as portrayed. But we do know there is use cases, especially when it comes to new residential builds, that simply do not require natural gas infrastructure. So in that regard, there is powers under the Local Government Act for using development permit areas around for GHG reductions. And regulating it through those development permit area guidelines. However, and I think there's a big question mark there around with the extent of those powers, and this is really to just ask for a legal review. I know some top municipal lawyers are currently doing that legal review for some clients in other jurisdictions elsewhere. You know, Vancouver, under the Vancouver Charter, was able to go a little bit further, and so on a matter that the courts haven't really ruled on, but a development permit area that has been exercising a lot of caution by local jurisdictions for the last decade. I think there's an opportunity to ask some lawyers of how that framework may be pushed, and if not, then you have the answer, and you can recalibrate your approach from there. And one of those approaches is actually included in the action plan, and that's around advocacy to the province. So the way I see this is, if this is a successful avenue forward, there would need to be that advocacy, and vice versa. If it's not, then that advocacy becomes more important. So I'm hopeful that council will support just receiving this information report, and then from there making a decision on how they wish to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I've got Councillor Armstrong and then Councillor Thorpe. Hold on. Yep, you're on. Oh.
Thank you. I'm actually opposed to this. We went through this with the plastic bag ban, and Councillor Thorpe, and anything to do with the environment must have provincial approval. So I think we're going to get that back right from the lawyers, that because this is an environmental issue, that it has to go to the province. So I also believe natural gas is a good option compared to what some of the things we're looking at, and we're not there yet, especially with the renewable natural gas. So I'm opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I supported the request for reconsideration as a courtesy to Councillor Brown, because he was absent when this was discussed at an earlier meeting, but I will not be changing my vote on the motion. I think I spoke to it last time. I haven't changed my view, and I don't see it's a good use of staff time even to produce a report on this topic at this time. So I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Mayor Krog and then Councillor Perino.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't wish to be overly critical of the intent behind this, but I'm trying to look at this in a very practical way. The reality is citizens of Nanaimo, by their own choices, want to use natural gas. Some use wood stoves. People use all kinds of things with respect to their daily lives that arguably contribute and do, we know, to climate change. The fires in Alberta are uppermost in the news right now. We all appreciate what this is all about. But candidly, doing this within the jurisdiction of a city of 102,000, and even to take these steps to spend the money, when, as Councillor Armstrong has pointed out, we probably wouldn't be able to touch it with a 10-foot pole unless the province approved, just strikes me as more about signaling than it does about anything that would be substantive. We'd be better to spend the money buying 100 trees probably, which is probably what the legal opinion is going to cost us, that would just have more impact. I'm not prepared to support something that may send a signal in terms of investment and to the business community generally, who may wish to actually build some housing in our fair city, if we're suggesting we're going to get tougher and have more restrictive guidelines that will frankly encourage that housing, those businesses, that construction to go to another community. I just can't see the value in that risk, particularly, as I say, when we'll be such a limited person. We're not some David going up against Goliath and it's going to end happily. We will simply stand out there and not advance anything. Lobbying the province, if that's what the will of council is, would be far more effective, I think, than doing this and putting us out as an outlier, frankly, in the larger community in the province. So I'm not prepared to support this.
Thank you. Councillor Perino.
I'm wondering if I could ask through you to staff, what kind of staff time would be required to do a report like this, first of all, and then I'll make a comment. Any idea?
Through the chair to Councillor Perino, this one would probably come under the sustainability section. There is some work that's already been done by some municipalities. In terms of time, it would be a combination of us also going and resources for legal advice as well as internal staff time. I hate to put an actual number on staff time, but I think we could do this within. Things probably going to have my guts regardless on this one. Looking at what other municipalities have done and then sending it out to legal review, I think it'd be, the cost is probably going to be more the legal review than the staff time, but there would be maybe 2 days of staff time going through looking at some examples that we can mine online, and I know staff have already taken a little cursory look at this. So,
thank you.
But I couldn't give you an estimate on the legal part of this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
So just a comment, I certainly agree with what Mayor Krog has said. I just, my struggle with this is that the intent is inspiring, but I struggle with the fact that we're always trying to get into homeowners' homes and tell them how to live. So you can't do this, you can't do this, you know, the list of you can't do's is so long, and now we're looking at adding something else. And this is an expensive you can't do. You know, the alternative to natural gas, those are some really expensive options. So, you know, we wonder, how do we build homes that are even an affordable range? Well, this is certainly not the way to do it. So I'll be voting against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown. Oh, sorry. We have Councillor Manley and then Councillor Brown as a second time speaker. Councillor Manley.
You got me on? Thank you. I do note that there are other municipalities that are moving in this direction. And we do tell homeowners what they can and can't do all the time as part of the regulations in terms of safety and other issues. And we need to make some moves on climate action. We are in a climate crisis. It's very clear. It's affecting communities in Canada, in this province, in our neighboring province, in the states to the south of us, and our young people expect us to be taking appropriate action. So getting a report and getting a legal review, I think, is completely in line with the work that we need to do in order to pass the regulations, in order to create safety for our community, for future generations. That's what this is about. We do ensure that people are building safe houses and safe decks, and we see bylaw enforcement coming before us on these issues, and this is an issue of safety as well. The price of heat pumps is going down, so it is becoming more comparable to natural gas, and we did hear from BC Hydro in their presentation the other day that the price of hydro and gas is comparable. There are a lot of incentives out there for people to be making these switches, and I think that we need to continue to support these moves in terms of climate action. So I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Lots to respond to, so I'm going to try to be brief. But first of all, thanks to Councillor Thorpe for supporting motion to hear me out, and I respect that even more, knowing that there potentially and likely is a contrary vote. Yeah. So with respect to the comments of Councillor Armstrong, very different than the plastic bag ban here. This is explicit powers within the Local Government Act around development permits for GHG reduction. But there's a big question mark on how far those could be pushed. This is simply to hopefully get some clarity on what that question mark is. Very much could come back that, and high likelihood that such a move would ultimately be straying into a realm that's not contemplated in the development permit area regime. But I think so far that's been based on assumptions. And with respect to Mayor Krog's comments, first of all, yes, we're 102,000 people, but it's it's the sum of a whole bunch of little actions of small cities and bigger cities and small towns that have gotten us here, and that's what it's going to be to get us out of it. So I think admitting defeat right away just on sheer numbers is an extremely pessimistic viewpoint. And so this is really to say, yeah, we do play a role, and we'll explore that. With respect to signaling too, that it is far more than just signaling. We have the data that shows the expansion of natural gas infrastructure. Data that went into the city plan was detrimental to other efforts. So that's not signaling. That's a good policy development based on what our own commission studies showed us. And finally, I don't think it will send a problematic message to the development community. Vancouver, under different powers, has taken a very extreme approach and did not result in a lack of desirability for people to build in Vancouver. With respect to Councillor Perino's points, the alternative isn't a extremely expensive or unknown approach. It's hydro, and there's a lot of products there. Whether it's heat pumps, whether it's furnaces that are based on electrical input, there is options there. So, and as natural gas fluctuates and as the cost of hydro fluctuates, we'll see how those price points change in the long term. So, all in all, I think those arguments are just simply a distraction and not based in reality. We have the data. We know what's necessary when it comes to climate action, and this is simply to find out if we have a legislative tool through the development permit area regime that we can utilize further I will add that this was already a potential motion within the action plan. This is simply seeking for some clarity to ensure that we're exploring it to the fullest extent possible. And as Mr. Lindsay did indicate last meeting or a couple meetings ago, the review may well take into considerations. This is for my own comfort, and I hope council's comfort to say, hey, this is a priority, and we want to make sure that we've followed or we've gotten all the information as we consider. Thank you so much.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. We've heard that there's other cities that are doing this, so why don't we just wait till they get their legal opinions, because they will be shared. So why are we throwing like fourth or fifth city in to do it? I don't understand why we would do that if it's already coming. And secondly, having lived through many losses of electrical power, electricity is not necessarily the way to go either. I've seen many people die because of lack of electricity. We heard very strongly from the mayors of Zavalis and Cayucet just how difficult it was for them when their power was out for 9 days straight. I've lived through all these, and especially through the cold. There's issues with insurance for heat pumps, maybe not so much here, but in those areas there are, because you need a secondary heat source, and the insurance company is not budging on that, and that was very clear in the reports, not only in the Times, but also in the CBC reports. So I just wanted to say, there's other communities doing it. Why don't we just wait till their legal opinions come through? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Manley, did you have your hand up? Okay, let me just press your button here. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So I haven't had any problems with my insurance company switching off my natural gas and going to a heat pump. And just to note that the BC new zero carbon step code legislation has come into effect as of May 1st. And Victoria Council passed a motion to direct staff to expedite the adoption of a zero carbon step code, and so has Saanich. So we could just skip the process of getting a legal review and ask our staff to expedite the process of having a zero carbon step code. I don't mind getting the legal review to begin that with, though.
Great, thank you. I'm not seeing any other speakers. I think getting the full scope of information on this is important to inform how we proceed. And I'm pretty convinced the direction that this world's going and what we need to do to take responsibility for keeping the climate livable. And I don't agree with making this being emissions reduction versus building housing or affordability. There's a transitioning in technology, the cost is coming down all the time. There's a lot of builders out there already working and doing this, and regulations of this sort, if that is what is possible, is about leveling the playing field, and it's actually quite a generator of, an economic development generator. So that's way farther down the road. First, we just need to get the information, and that's the first step. So I'm supportive. Thank you. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor and opposed? Councillor Perino, Thorpe, Mayor Krog, and Armstrong. Motion carried. Okay. Any other motions that are to be brought forward?
And Chair, just as a reminder, the motions for consideration that were noted earlier are on the screen.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to, thank you, Chair. My apologies, Your Worship. I would like to move the second information report with respect to similarly but different a legal opinion on low carbon energy systems.
Seconded by Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Brown, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you. Again, yeah, it's slightly related, but it's just focusing on, is there another area here of potentiality for the regulation of energy source systems for for buildings. So I would almost imagine it would be one staff report if council was to approve, or one legal review if council was to approve this. Essentially, the options around available for council around having guidelines and regulations with respect to energy sources for buildings and building typologies. So I hope council will support this. I think it's just a companion piece, and then we'll have an answer. Again, there's efforts. A lot of jurisdictions have actually already established low carbon energy system bylaws, but this is putting it all in the context and seeing what is possible for City of Nanaimo's consideration. And I do acknowledge that different communities will have different needs, especially with their hydro up times, the type of winters that they have, et cetera, et cetera. So this is really a tailored, trying to see if there's a tailored approach for the City of Nanaimo when taken all together, rather than advocating the province for one full-on piece that it's probably going to be harder to do because different communities, especially as you move up north, have very, very different needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Armstrong, McRogue, Councillor Thorpe, and Perino opposed. Motion carried. Okay. Ms. Gray, did you?
Thank you, Chair. So there is an additional motion that you have asked for, or council could ask for an information report be prepared for the Wakesaya corridor. And then there's, I believe, one more on e-bikes below as well, too. So I'm not sure if there's more than that. Oh yeah, and the other ones as well. So there's still a few more. Up to you and the committee.
Okay, anybody want to move any other motions? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Chair. And I acknowledge some of these motions are of interest to you as we jointly put them together, but you are sitting in that chair spot. So I will move the Wakesaya corridor motion, and if there's a seconder, quickly speak to it.
Seconded by Councillor Hemmens, and if you'd like to speak to it, Councillor Brown.
Chair, I'm going to step out, recuse myself from this because I live half a block from Wakesaya on a dead-end street, so I rely on that corridor. Let's see if there's snacks.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Manley. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. We've spent, as a council, over the course of 5-6 years, a lot of effort in this particular area and also on topics of transportation. Last council did consider or did request an information report on this matter. However, I personally felt it didn't come back with the due diligence for full consideration. So, seeing the success of Metro and especially hearing about the development interest and the investment along the corridor, and especially with properties being acquired or likely to be acquired with and having conditions upon them on the purchase upon rezoning, I think there's another area for ample opportunity for that significant level of city investment that will result in an ROI that will see development along where we would like to see it, especially with things like the sports complex, the hockey rinks, school, VIU in proximity, and then also proximity to downtown. So really, I feel there's been a lot of work done on a whole variety of plans and also shovels in the ground on some very important projects that I would hope that we would consider this project. And like I said, there could be very good reasons that to not proceed at this time. However, I do not feel a couple of years ago those were fully outlined for council in their consideration, and there were some gaps in that information that was brought forward. So yeah, I hope council will be supportive of getting that information report. I have tried to be hyper specific with respect to items to include, just to avoid a situation such as last time where I felt there was some, as acknowledged, some gaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. Yes, I'm supportive of this. I think it ties in really nicely to Action 198, which we supported under city structure to work with VIU, SD68, and private developers to explore the potential for major developments along Wakasai Avenue. And I think this is a really important piece of that as we're envisioning what that could look like. So I think this ties in really nicely. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Got Councillor Perino and then Mayor Krog.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to staff. So in a situation like this where we would be looking at particular development plans, you know, anything to do with the corridor, whatever, wouldn't we automatically look at, you know, how the potential might be for transit development? Wouldn't that be part of the, I guess what I'm asking is, wouldn't we already do this? Do we have to put it into another motion? Not sure who would answer that.
I can take that one, Mr.
Sure.
Chair. So this project, I think what Councillor Brown's referring to is that this project was planned for a near term, like earlier, and the project itself is largely driven by asset management considerations. We have a failing road surface, we have a failing storm drain, and a number of undersized water mains and so on. And so it's been shifted out because the area of failure on the road has been sort of mitigated by a small investment in patching. We're addressing the failing storm drain. Speaking of sulfur-rich water running from the mines, and so the intent really was to build this as an active transportation corridor from about 1st Avenue to 6th, and but it's largely within the confines of the existing cross-section, so it's not quite as extensive perhaps. At least that was the original scope, and basically due to the general capital funding availability for this project is the reason that it's been pushed. So that's the context of the project.
Okay.
And we would look at the potential for development, of course, in partnerships, but any of the discussions we've had with VIU to date are fairly preliminary in nature, and certainly my colleagues can speak to that a little bit more if there's further information. And the council's well aware of the desires and the push for a redevelopment of NDSS as well.
So what you're saying then is, Mr. Sims, is that you do in fact need this motion to go forward to do more, is that correct?
Well, it's more, it is incorporated, like it's part of the plan, it is a priority plan, and it's just that it has been retarded or delayed because of the general capital funding considerations. Okay. So the way I'm interpreting Councillor Brown's motion is to
bring it back?
Bring it back, have a larger discussion around what I've kind of verbally summarized there, and if councils sees the value in proceeding or accelerating it, that might create a funding push into the capital plan.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair. We're interested in building the waterfront walkway, and we get correspondence on that. We're certainly interested in the South End Community Centre. We get lots of correspondence on that. We get correspondence on a number of things around town that are important. We have staff who've made a very cogent argument for the knock, and that is a very important capital expenditure. And I'll try not to mention Metro Drive without setting anyone's hair on fire, which I think is a lovely project and delightful that it's proceeded so well. But conscious as I am of the fact that we have enormous pressure on a very limited number of staff in our transportation department right now as we speak, having lost a staffer as well to the regional district, I'm hard pressed to ask them when, frankly, no one has written to mayor and council, to my knowledge, in the last 2 years about upgrades to Wakesaya Avenue. And in light of what Mr. Sims has said, that we're patching things along as best we can, I'm not sure that this is the time to be spending money or requiring staff time to prepare an information report when we have so many other, what I will call capital necessities in front of us. There are limits, and sometimes you have to figure what those limits are. And as I say, I come back to the pressure on staff in particular, let alone the expenditures, let alone the alternate expenditures, which are required and important to the city and a substantial number of citizens. So I'm not prepared to support this today. Maybe in some time in the future, yes, but at the present time, given the circumstances, I'm simply not. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. A question to Mr. Sims, please. Since the mayor did bring up Mitchell Drive, and I'm not opposed to the sidewalks, and I'm not opposed to the bike lanes, I'm opposed to the narrowing of the roads. Having met with the ICBC safety coordinator, they're getting complaints daily on the road. The what do you call them, collision repair shops thanked me when I was in there for all the extra business they're getting from the city for the side swipes. I don't know if we take into consideration that cars are now 6 inches wider than they used to be. I guess my concern is when we do this, if this does pass, could we talk to the emergency services about their concerns? Because that is a very major road for police, fire, and ambulance. Because I know, having conversations with them all, they find the road is far too narrow. People can't move over effectively, which actually, when that happens, does actually put cyclists and pedestrians in issue. And also the ICBC person, because she said they weren't consulted before, and they have concerns that they would like to put forward. So those would just be my points, that if this passes, that those people be consulted as well, because they do have very legitimate concerns. Because I don't believe that you can make a road system safer for one and not for the other. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can just speak to a couple of points, and one that goes to Councillor Perino's question earlier too, is that Wakesaya is part of the bus rapid transit network that's envisioned in the regional district's transit redevelopment strategy, and that's been adopted, of course, into city plan. VIU represents a transit hub. The active transportation corridor would, that might be sort of a secondary corridor, if I can use that in air quotes. The primary active transportation corridor would be around Buttertubs and through the Nick and Knack property, sort of the back channel. And certainly this we'd want to, of course, meet our standards, but I won't debate road widths at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Hammonds.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to support this because I was surprised to see the Wakesaya corridor not in our action plan, because it's something we've been talking about since I made it to this table, and we are seeing enormous development along 3rd, going down to the university. ND is likely going to have a major capital build soon. We're investing a lot of resources and time into the stadium district. It seems like it's one of those hubs of the community that is growing, and I would like to have information on what our contribution is going to look like if we go forward. So I'm happy to see a staff report come forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be quick. I think there's been good points raised on both sides, and the way I really see this comes down to, we spend a lot of time talking about economic development, and we talk about branding, we talk about all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, there's some really basic bread and butter type stuff that cities do that are highly important to economic development. That is the type of land use they put in place, but also the infrastructure that supports that land use. And I think Metro was a good example. We could talk about all day the above surface works and whether those are a good thing or a bad thing. But at the end of the day, the investment in the transportation, the stormwater, the water, and the sewer all comes together to create a highly desirable package, especially when it's coupled with land use that takes development risk away. So I think Councillor Hammonds rightfully identifies this is a hot area. You can imagine a triangle between the hospital and the neighborhood around there, VIU, the school, and the residential around there. and downtown. And you imagine complete infrastructure along through that triangle that can support the redevelopment of NDSS, can support the potential redevelopment of the D&D lands, and can support the types of corridor zoning that are envisioned in our planning documents. You'll see a lot of investment, and you've seen the beginnings of that with Metro. And I think the potentiality here of the Wakasai corridor in that regard, from a pure economic development perspective, is massive, and that's something that, to me, that warrants further consideration through multiple lenses. But to me, that's really a driving factor of how successful cities are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Brown. I'm not seeing any other speakers. I'm in support of this. I think that the upgrade and redevelopment of this section meets and will help us meet a lot of the official community plan objectives, from transit, mode shift, housing, and, private investment does follow infrastructure, and this is a way that we can really meet official community plan goals and, provide some economic development at the same time. So not seeing any other speakers, we'll call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Councillor Armstrong, Krog, Councillor Thorpe, and Councillor Perino opposed, and that's a 4-4, and it fails on a tie. Does somebody want to go grab Councillor Manley? So there's a couple more motions that were submitted. Sure. Any movers on these? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Should have the e-bike one in your package there. There's an identified action, it's simply to move it up in terms of being explored. Some other jurisdictions have implemented programs, especially with, I think it was Saanich has an equity component of it. Really, this is, when it comes to seniors especially, I think there's a real neat market and an opportunity for seeing folks be a little more active and take advantage of some of the infrastructure being. Oh, sorry, there's no seconder, so I'm speaking to it too soon. My apologies, Councillor.
Councillor Armstrong, seconding for discussion.
Thank you. Just finish up there when I already started. Yeah, so I think there's an opportunity to explore it. Some neat stuff has been done in other jurisdictions on the island. Not an incredibly costly program, and I do note we have funding in our climate action reserves. This is not saying that we go ahead with it. It's simply to bump up that exploration and that consideration to council sooner, and also add in that equity component. Sure, we're hitting that note because at the end of the day, we just don't want to be developing rebate programs for expensive items that folks with means already have the ability to purchase anyways. It's about taking a little broader perspective and seeing if we can expand some of that more expensive items, but that would really benefit certain segments of the population to utilize some of the infrastructure we're building. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We've got Councillor Hemmons. Sorry, Councillor Perino, and then Mayor Krog. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Chair. And I apologize. I don't actually understand what this means. Develop a program to encourage the adoption of e-bikes with equity considerations. What do you mean by equity considerations? I'm not sure what that, does that mean that we're going to help to subsidize these? I'm just looking for some clarity about what that means.
More money if you're poor.
I'm sorry?
More money if you're poor.
Mayor Krog, you can speak if you want to provide an answer.
Is there some ratio that we're...
Thank you, Chair. My assumption is, and unless Councillor Brown corrects me, is that what it means is that you would provide subsidies based on income. So if you have a higher income, you would be eligible for the subsidy or a lesser subsidy. If you're poorer, you'd be entitled to a larger subsidy. Unless I assume we're talking about income and not trying to provide bikes based on race, creed, color, religion, or anything like that. So.
Yeah, I think that is a pretty good description, I would say, to add on to that. I think sometimes, you know, this is pretty broad direction about developing a program and not specific around an incentive program, but a lot of times programs have been developed without sort of that lens of equity and benefit, you know, folks that don't need support as opposed. So just having that lens is helpful to make sure that it's fair. Councillor Brown, did you want to provide? No, I think it's been covered. Does that provide clarity?
I think so. Thank you.
Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, and I'll come back to a point I made in the earlier discussion. We have a transportation department that is understaffed and I would argue overwhelmed, and we're going to ask them to develop a program to encourage the adoption of e-bikes. I opposed a previous motion during the previous council's term on a very basic principle. No one gave me any evidence whatsoever that there was a need to encourage the purchase of e-bikes by the good citizens of Nanaimo. The shops were sold out practically. They couldn't get supply. They couldn't begin to meet the demand. And quite frankly, if the horse is running, I don't see any need to whip it. The fact is, this is proceeding appropriately and well in the community without the necessity of spending public resources to subsidize the purchase of what are ultimately consumer goods by consumers who can presumably afford it. And on the equity side of it, with great respect, there is nothing to stop someone who has received a public benefit for purchasing what is an electric bike, turning around and selling it and pocketing the money. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but you know, there are quote-unquote people out there who are going to see an increase in their taxes this year, and they're going to be saying, Council, I want my community center. Workers are going to say, I want a safe place to work. And we haven't committed yet, to my knowledge, any significant or serious amount of money to the most basic of things, which the cycling community keeps reminding me from time to time, and that is a safe, secure place to lock the bikes, bicycles, e-bikes, or whatever, when they get to a destination. So this really is, pardon the pun, the cart before the horse in this case. So if we want to talk about that, that's a motion that's worth debating. But in the meantime, the concept that we're going to assist consumers to purchase e-bikes based on equity principles or any other principle, to me, I think this is just not the time. You bring me evidence that there's 1,000 people in Nanaimo who'll buy an e-bike tomorrow as long as this council steps forward. With great respect, I suspect it'll be like most programs when it comes to subsidizing what we want to encourage people to do. The ones who are going to do it have already made up their minds to do it. They go in and they ask politely, oh, by the way, is the government going to subsidize this purchase for me? Yes, I'll happily take advantage of that program. So no, it's not going to get my support today, any more than it did last time.
Oh, wrong button there. Councillor Eastmere.
Thank you. I appreciate the intent of this motion because e-bikes are still pretty expensive, and there's a lot of workers who I think would benefit from being able to buy an electric bike because our transit system isn't where we need it to be yet, and cars are still expensive to own. So I think that there is a portion of the population certainly that would be much more interested in getting an electric bike if there was a little bit of help for them to be able to do that. As a city, we have a program to help people afford to install an electric car charger in their home, and so that presumes that they can both afford well, they have a home for one, and then they can afford to buy an electric car, and we're helping them with a charger for it. So I think that this is access to an electric bike. There's still barriers there, and it's a lower barrier than to buying an electric car. And for example, I will never be able to buy an electric car. Like, that's just completely outside the realm of affordability for me as a renter. But an electric bike, like, I have bike storage at my apartment and could definitely take advantage of something like this. But electric bikes are still also kind of outside the realm of affordability for myself as well. So I think having that equity consideration of whether we can assist people who don't have the expendable income to be able to invest in an electric bike, I think that's a really good thing. And we're building out our cycling infrastructure and our active transportation routes, and this is really just a way to help people switch to active transportation. And yeah, so I think this is an important piece, and I would love to see what could come of something like this.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in support. I think Mayor Krogh raised some good points about ensuring that there's a secure place for people to lock up their bikes, and I could see that that could be part of a program to encourage people to buy bikes that are expensive, is having a secure place to park them and lock them in the community, and maybe even charge them. I will support this. I think that equity considerations, if there's a program that we have in terms of young people and students that could benefit from a program that incentivized them to get an e-bike, I would be supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manley. Councillor Hemmens.
Thank you, Chair. I was on the fence about this one simply because we're giving staff a ton of work. But I note that we're adding this as a priority action for implementation in 0 to 4 years. So this could conceivably come in 2026. I do think it's a good idea to get it on the work plan. So I'm going to support it. I would, however, like to see this be run through the Accessibility and Inclusion Committee before it comes back to Council, if it's coming with financial recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hemmens. I think just to echo Mayor Krogh's comments about the need for secure bikes, especially people have expensive bikes, to encourage cycling. And I think that that needs to be taken into serious consideration. And I think including that in the consideration of developing a program to encourage the adoption of e-bikes with equity considerations. I appreciate folks jumping immediately to debating subsidies, and there are definitely some considerations around that to take, but I think that this is important. We're on the work plan, and I do firmly believe, in terms of seeing a mode shift, that e-bikes are a game changer, and it's about getting things to the tipping point and looking at how we can encourage that. And so I think it is in our community's best interest to support a project like this, and leave it at that. So I'm not seeing any more comments, so we'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Armstrong, Mayor Krogh, Councillor Thorpe, and Councillor Perino. Motion carried. There is I think, final Councillor Brown. Remember all your guys' names here.
I'll move that motion, Chair, around the donut economics from the mayor's leadership team.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Manley.
Chair, if I may, and you might be able to speak to this better than I, but I appreciate as someone that participated in a few of the tables of the mayor's leadership table, I appreciate some the recommendations, seeing them sprinkled throughout the documents, and that's very apparent when it comes to things like capital projects and I know some of the items around the subgroup or the sub-table of the mayor's leadership table that was chaired by Mr. Smythe, Kim Smythe, around implementing some of the donut economic items. Really just asking for how these items are being implemented. If they are, I think you can see the flavor of some of it in city plan, but just being a little more explicit so we can understand how and when those items are being implemented. And like I said, Chair, you can probably speak to this better than I, but thank you.
I'm not seeing any other speakers.
Chair, just a comment or question actually on this one. Number 3 is a big one, and I think that we would need at least as minimum a workshop with council to unpack what that means, to take a look at it, because the other ones are referrals and awareness and that type of thing. But to develop a donut-focused, outcomes-based budgeting philosophy is a very big topic, and so there's the budgeting process is obviously can be augmented and so forth. But I think there needs to be a little bit more work done to understand what that means before we could do that. Or to meet what the ask is or the intent is with that motion. I'm just suggesting that there needs to be some clarity brought to what that is, what that looks like, and how that attaches itself to the mechanisms that we have in place now. So I'm not saying no to it. I'm just saying that probably needs a fair amount of work to understand what that is, and then see how that can be incorporated into what we do.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you. I would like them to be separated because I don't support number 3. I never will support number 3, so you can do all the work you want. I think the people that believe in that philosophy already are going to apply that. I will not be applying that philosophy ever to my budgeting decisions. They will be made based on what I feel that the public can do, what the needs are, what the requirements are, so I think that's redundant. But I would support 1 and 2, but I certainly will not be supporting 3. So if we could take them separate, I'd appreciate it. Please, Seriatim.
Chair, through you to Councillor Armstrong, yes, they could be voted on seriatim, though there is 4, I would say, because in the actual body of the motion, it says that a report be prepared for council outlining an implementation schedule for the remaining recommendations. So I like that we're in the report. So the motion is for recommendations 1 to 3, which are noted there, as well as a report being prepared outlining the implementation schedule for the remaining recommendations that were included in the Mayor's Leaders Table Donut Economics Working Group. So I'd really see it in 4, to be voted on in 4 sections.
I don't see an immediate problem with that, if council is amenable to take it one at a time. Somebody would like to move the first item there.
Chair, I believe it's already, Councillor Brown moved the entirety, so if you want to vote on the report now being prepared outlining implementation schedule for the remaining recommendations, I think that would be the first motion you would vote on.
Okay. Do they need to be?
They don't need to be moved and seconded.
Okay.
Councillor Brown has already moved it, and it was seconded by.
Okay. So yeah, the first part of the item, which is the first clause. We'll call the question on it. All in favor?
Can I speak to it first? Yeah, I have a concern with bringing that forward the way that is, for the simple fact that it says that outline and implement for the remaining recommendations. We have could you change that too for the remaining approved recommendations? Because otherwise we're voting that we're going to approve them. That's my concern.
Chair, through you to Councillor Armstrong, Council received and endorsed the Mayor's Leaders Table report. So those recommendations were in the report. So I believe this motion is okay, to Councillor Armstrong's point, because it's just asking for a plan in implementing the recommendations, and at that time, council could have debate and question the implementation of those recommendations.
So if the recommendation doesn't pass, then that won't be an issue, because the way I read it, you're reading that, and this is how I'm reading it, is that if we vote in favor of that, then that means that we vote in favor for the remaining recommendations.
I think if one of the recommendations is not approved, I think it'll be pretty clear direction to not have that included.
Through you, Chair, so the Mayor's Leaders Table report on entire report, which included the Donut Economics Working Group recommendations, was already received and endorsed by Council in July of 2022. So this report would be outlining implementation schedule for those recommendations. Should Council have an issue with any of those actions being implemented, they could speak against them and vote against them at that time.
Okay. Okay, so all in favor?
Sure, I understand.
Opposed? Councillor Thorpe and Councillor Armstrong. Okay, item number 1, including council orientation and establish ad hoc committee to develop awareness training for the city staff and council to embed the concept through the organization. All in favor?
No, wait a minute.
Sorry?
Discussion, please.
Okay. So I'm unclear if we're not moving them. Do we just need to, it's just on the floor and then we call it discussion? Okay.
Yes, so they're all on the floor and they're just being voted on seriatim. So if there
Understood.
is further discussion.
Yeah. My apologies. So I've got a speakers list here, Councillor Thorpe and then Councillor Perino. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I can't sit silent on this. I heard Councillor Armstrong say that she might support number 1 and number 2. She's far more generous than I am. I will not be supporting any of these recommendations, and I've made my position clear on this before, and I won't re-argue the whole platform again now. But I do not support the donut framework as an overriding philosophy for this city. I don't think it has anything to do with economics. I note that the Mayor's Table group did not even take what they were investigating to the business community for their opinion. I've done a lot of research on the donut philosophy in recent months, knowing that this motion would come forward, and my position has not changed. I see it as contrary to development, to building, and in fact, one review I read called it anti-capitalist. I don't think it's in our best interest to look at budgeting that's based on this, because, as I say, in my opinion, and in the opinion of certainly other reviewers, some other reviewers, it has nothing to do with GDP economics at all. It has nothing to do with economic development. So I see it as actually counterproductive to economic growth in our city, and so don't look for my support on any of these. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe. I have Councillor Brown and then Councillor Perino.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little confused on how this has played out. The recommendation literally is to get an information report on 3 things. So I'm not sure why there's 4 motions. So if in my mind, if there was concern about one in particular, it would just have been an amendment to the motion to have it removed. But yeah, so I just highlight that.
No, I appreciate that, Councillor Brown, and I think that probably would have been the most logical way to proceed, by removing one. We're kind of committed to a path here, and unfortunately, I don't know if Ms. Gurry?
Yeah, just clarification through you, Chair, to Councillor Brown. The way I'm reading this recommendation, it says that the recommendations 1 to 3 of the Mayor's Leaders Table Donut Economics Working Group be incorporated into the priority action plan. And, so this is like and, not as well. So, and a report be prepared for council outlining an implementation schedule for the remaining recommendations. So, Councillor Brown, are you saying that the remaining recommendations that were in the Donut Economics Working Group aren't part of the motion considered?
Ms. Gary, I'm not sure, as this is not my particular, exactly my particular motion, but you know, the way it's separated out, I just think I'm not actually sure what I'm voting on when I vote for number 1 abstractly.
So through you, Chair, to council, to the committee, staff received the motion not noted 1, 2, and 3. So the motion that we received from councillors Gesselbrock and Brown were that that recommendations 1 to 3 of the Mayor's Leaders Table Donut Economics Working Group be incorporated into the priority action plan, and a report be prepared for council outlining an implementation schedule for the remaining recommendations. That's what we received. What staff have done was just put number 1, 2, and 3, what the recommendations 1 to 3 of the Mayor's Leaders Table Donut Economics Working Group were, so that the rest of the committee would have that like knowledge of what you were speaking to. That's what we've done.
Yeah, so understood. I moved the motion as submitted. So
Yeah.
there is no number 1, 2, and 3 on the motion that was on the floor. Because the motion is self-contained. So by adding those, now we're taking a vote on number 1 to 3, which was never actually moved.
I understand what you're saying. And when Councillor Armstrong asked to vote on them separately, I then stated it would have to be into 4, because the first part of the motion does say a report be prepared for council outlining an implementation schedule for the remaining recommendations, which would be 1, and then the other 3 would be the other 3. So I see what you're saying.
To interject, I appreciate, this is not simple, cut and dry. It was a recommendation made by the leaders table that was approved by council. There was 5 items in it. Not all council members may have been aware of what they are, and we are asking to implement, 1 to 3, and then get a report on them. And if council members are unsure and need to vote on each one individually, they are, individual actions. And I think that it is a little bit messy, but we can go through and maybe these things do need to be debated because they are providing direction, and there might be council members that aren't supportive of it. So I think we just need to stick with the path that we're on and vote on each of those 3 recommendations. That we've done 1 and now do recommendation 1, 2, and 3. I think Councillor Brown, I do see your point that that's not what you moved, and I think staff were trying to add elements in for clarity for other council members, and so it's gotten a little muddled. But would you be amenable to going through each of those recommendations as on the screen?
Well, Chair, this is where I'm getting confused, because it was just moved and passed that the recommendations of 1 to 3 be implemented.
Let's rescind it.
And then
Just
you may
rescind
have a
Okay.
contrary vote.
I'll move to rescind it. I voted in favor of it. I'll move to rescind it.
Okay, so we've got to move to rescind.
Yeah.
So I think what we want to achieve is just press the reset button and go back to the original motion moved by Councillor Brown.
That's right.
Are we all amenable to this?
So there's
Okay.
a motion on the floor.
All right, so the motion on the floor is that the recommendations 1 to 3 of the Mayor's Leaders Table Donut Economic Working Group be incorporated into the...
No, Your Worship. No, Your Worship. Sorry, Chair. The rescinding is the first motion that was made, which was the first paragraph,
Okay,
right?
so
So we rescind that and start again. Just rescind it and start again.
So procedurally, Chair, I think rather than a rescinding motion, just procedurally, point of order that I think Councillor Brown was getting at is that he moved a motion and it was seconded, which is not what has been debated. So I think that because the motion that was voted on wasn't what was on the table, there's nothing to rescind, and what you could do is go back to what was moved and seconded and vote on it again, because it was incorrectly perceived by myself and therefore the committee on what you were voting on. So Councillor Brown moved that recommendation as noted, and from there we muddled with it. So as the mover, he's saying that's not what I moved and basically calling a point of order on that.
I appreciate the comments, and we'll go with the original motion, and that motion is currently on the floor, and if I could ask council to debate that motion, that would be greatly appreciated, so we can move through the mud and get on with things. So any speakers to this? All right, I'll quickly speak to it. There was a lot of work that was put in by the Mayor's Leaders Table. There was a committee on donut awareness. So there was 5 recommendations that were put forward. It was approved by council. I think we have an official community plan that basically sets a vision for the community, basically setting our sites that we're community working towards, working within the environmental limits of our planet and meeting the needs of people. And I think that's a very important vision to keep reiterating and to send that message of that's what we're trying to do as a community. And I think getting alignment from other organizations that we've created is really important. We've set out a series of objectives and targets and indicators, and I have other organizations that have reached out about setting up their indicators so that they can align with what the city's trying to achieve. And so these recommendations basically seek to align around the objectives that we've set out in our official community plan. And so I think it's important to continue with that process and follow through with our official community plan. Speaking to the donut-focused outcomes-based budgeting philosophy for council, I think outcome-based budgeting is a different orientation to budgeting, and I think that it probably will require some unpacking because it could be a complex shift. I think that it is important for us to look at basically being very clear about what we're trying to achieve as a community, and we've set out objectives and aligning our budget behind that. And there's aspects that we do, and I think that there's always room for improvement. And so I think that particular recommendation is an important one that we need to follow through on. So without much more, I'd like to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Perino, Councillor Thorpe, and Councillor Armstrong. That motion carried. And I appreciate council's patience. Sometimes things get a little bit muddled, and I think everybody's trying to get clarity and be accommodating, and sometimes it's messy. So I appreciate your patience with me as chair. And I do not believe there's any more items. Is there any more items that folks wish to proceed with? Okay.
Councillor Brown has his hand up.
Councillor Brown, no. Okay, that brings us to the end then. So motion to adjourn. Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Eastmere. All in favor? Adjourned.
Yeah, I thought it.